Introduction. I want to thank you and congratulate you for downloading the book Rental Property Investing, the beginner's guide to owning rental properties and earning passive income. You've made a great investment through the purchase of this book, and upon finishing it, you'll be well on your way to making even more significant investments that will have the potential to lead to long-term profits. After discovering the secrets to earn passive income through the acquisition of rental properties, you'll be one step closer to quitting your day job in no time. Think about it. Maybe it's always been a dream of yours to be your own boss and set your own schedule. This book will provide you with the opportunity to do exactly that. This book contains proven steps and strategies on how to start making money on your own terms. If you're tired of having to live paycheck to paycheck and you're ready to earn real money, then this book is for you. At its core, the most basic qualities of owning a rental property involve keeping a professional mind as you move through the purchasing process and have the proper tools at your disposal after you've bought the property so that you can flip it fast. The answers to these needs is what this book can offer you, and you'll have a significant advantage over other rental property investors with it as your trusty guide. Thanks again for downloading this book. I hope you enjoy it. Chapter 1. The Advantages of Owning a Rental Property. While passive income and the ability to be a landlord are two major reasons why an individual might consider taking on the responsibility that comes with owning a rental property, there are even more reasons to seriously consider taking this step. This chapter will look at the many benefits that exist for a landlord after he or she purchases a home at a bargain cost and repairs it on the cheap. Seeing these types of advantages will hopefully convince you as to why you should be investing in rental property. Rental property advantage number 1, asset appreciation. One of the first aspects that make owning a rental property so incentivizing is the fact that property in general is considered to be an asset. This means that it holds real value in the sense that it can carry debt, primarily through mortgages, and be given to others in exchange for settling a debt, such as when a bank repossesses a home. Over time, inflation is likely to occur in an economy, and this results in a limitation of the purchasing power that's available to the dollar. It takes more money in order to buy a good or a service. When you buy an investment property, the concept of inflation plays to your advantage because of its worth as an asset. While some other assets depreciate when inflation strikes, such as stock or liquid money, a home typically appreciates along with rising inflation. What's more, since you're going to be using this additional property as a rental home, you'll be receiving inflated amounts of money from any tenant that you agree to keep in your home. While there is a possibility that you can lose money on a property investment if you don't gauge the renovation costs and market correctly, a property investment is often far more secure than other types of asset-oriented investments in which you can partake. Noticing the value of inflation. As was just stated, hand in hand with asset appreciation is the importance of inflation. Inflation has made it progressively more difficult to buy possessions because the procuring power of cash has diminished over time. Whenever more physical money is printed and given to an economy, the value of that money that was previously in circulation goes down. This is a basic supply and demand concept. If there is more of something, it's generally less valuable than if it were in short supply. While the hope when creating more currency is that with more money people will buy more goods and the economy will remain healthy, the actual result is often a dollar that is less valuable. For these reasons, it's not often that a government will intentionally increase an economy's money supply. However, inflation can sometimes occur unintentionally as well. What's important to understand about the concept of inflation is that it's generally regarded as negative. However, when inflation occurs, the price of real estate usually increases with the rising inflation rates. This phenomena increases the value of the property and can be beneficial for you in the long term. While the primary reason why you're buying a property is to rent it out, there may come a day that you'll be tired of the commitments of being a landlord and you'll be ready to sell the house. The notion of inflation can provide you with knowledge that there's a potential that your house will be worth more than what you purchased it for. In this way, both asset appreciation and inflation can work in your favor. Rental property advantage number 2, greater liquidity. In terms of liquidity, investing in a rental property can yield greater immediate returns to you in the form of money than can other types of investments. Think about it. If you invest in the stock market, your money is stuck in its system until you take it out. And sometimes the decision to do so itself can be a risk, especially if you're hoping that the market will take a turn for the better. Additionally, unless you know the ins and outs of the stock market intimately, the nuances of it can sometimes be confusing and intimidating. You have to know what you're getting into if you want to feel like your money's safe. When you invest in a rental property, you don't have these concerns to worry about. Instead of putting your money into something that is volatile and sometimes shady, you have the option of putting your money into something that you will be completely in charge of and over which you will have control. Of course, it's likely that you won't have the potential to grow your income as greatly as you could if you were going to invest in the stock market. But unless you're attracted to the large sums of money and risks that are involved in this type of venture, you're better off adhering to the principles that are presented in this book. Unlike the stock market, the lease agreements that you make with your tenants are concrete evidence of the returns that you will see on your property once you start renting it out to people. While you should be eager to find tenants as soon as you're done flipping your home, you shouldn't be looking for just anybody to rent your home. You should be looking for someone reliable and who will be able to make their rent payments on time. Additionally, if you can find a tenant who will be a long-term resident, you will have an ever greater sense of security from an income standpoint. In order to ensure this, consider designing a lease for a yearly contract or even a 2-year contract. As long as you can find a responsible tenant who usually pays their lease on time, you should be able to steadily have a positive cash income operation that counterbalances the price of the mortgage and interest that is accrued on the property. For example, let's say you're renting out a 3-bedroom home for $3,000 per month. Your mortgage payment is only $2,500 per month, but your tenants are unaware of this fact. This means that you're netting $500 per month on the property, and you're paying off the property with funds that aren't being drained from your wallet. It's easy to see how renting a property that you own will lead to more liquidity in your life, giving you the opportunity to pursue new avenues of entertainment or savings. Asset capitalization. Asset capitalization is when money holds its value after the point of purchase. This is an advantage that purchasing an investment property can offer you, which is not the fact for many different types of purchases. For example, whenever you pay a water bill for your house or for your apartment, you're paying for the previous month of service. This means that the service has already occurred and that your money is holding no actual value for the services rendered at the time when the money is requested. When you buy a property, your money holds its value because of its status as a valuable asset through aspects of the house such as the property on which it sits and the foundation that it sits upon. Because your property holds its value after the point of purchase, it's considered a capitalizing asset. This is yet another reason why it's smart to own a rental property. A feeling of fulfillment. A subtler feeling that might occur once you finally go through with buying an investment property is the sense of satisfaction and fulfillment that comes with it. While the progress and wealth of other types of investments can only be understood and seen with a portfolio or through stocks, the beauty and strength of a home is evidence of its success outright. Although you're seeking to primarily use this second home as an investment property, and it's unlikely you'll live in it for long if at all, this property is still yours. You get to look at it whenever you want and make any and all changes to it that you see fit. Additionally, doing your own home improvement projects can increase this overall feeling of self-worth and pride. You get to feel good knowing that your hands fixed the cracked floor in the bathroom and that you're the one who installed the new cabinets in the kitchen. These types of projects can give added meaning to your life in ways that you may not currently appreciate. You'll be able to physically show others the success that you're enjoying, And this can provide the rental property investor with an increased feeling of freedom. Chapter 2: Factors to Consider Before Purchasing a Property. Hopefully, the previous chapter has convinced you as to why investing in a rental property is a fabulous idea that can have unanticipated influences on your life far into the future. Now that you are hopefully more confident with the idea of owning a second home, it's time for you to start thinking about your strategy upon entering the investment property market. This chapter will focus on how you should be considering this endeavor, with tips on how you should be prioritizing your efforts. Tip number 1: before you purchase a rental property, know what you want to buy. You wouldn't be the first aspiring rental property investor to walk into a home that's beyond your budget and immediately fall in love with it. This is one of the biggest traps that a new rental property owner should avoid at all costs. Buying a rental property is not all about house hunting. In fact, house hunting should be done after you've calculated how much you're willing to spend. Once this number is determined, you need to respect it and work within its parameters. Don't be fooled by a house that's for sale with gorgeous bay windows and a fabulously huge backyard. Think about what you want to buy and stick to your intentions. Remember, owning a rental property is a business, not a luxury. If you want to truly operate your venture in a professional manner, think about what type of house will yield you the greatest income in the fastest way possible. Would this be a duplex? Would it be a house that requires little repair? Should it be a house that needs repair, but only in ways that wouldn't require a subcontractor? You should begin to think about what you want from a property long before you close on one. Along the same lines as knowing what you want out of your new property, you also need to make sure that you have the allocated funds available to make this type of investment. In terms of overall investment strategies, purchasing a rental property is one of the more expensive ways to go about making a real estate investment. When an individual purchases a home, they can opt out to make a 10% down payment on the property. Of course, they will have to compensate for this by paying a higher percentage rate over time, but they're free to pay as little as 10% of a down payment at the point of purchase. When you're looking to purchase an income property, the stakes are a bit higher. You cannot simply put down 10%. You have to agree to put down at least 20, because you have to prove that you have plenty of funds available before being considered for a mortgage on an investment home. You need to do your math beforehand so that you don't look foolish in front of your mortgage lender. Know what type of property you want to buy, and most importantly, know what you can afford. This is the most important factor of rental property investment success. Tip number 2: before you purchase a rental property, research the neighborhood. After you're positive that you have the money available to purchase a rental home property, you are far from finished with your research. After you've found a property that meets your budget, the next step is to research its immediate surrounding area. While there are a number of sites that can help you to conduct your research adequately, the two best sites out there are Zillow and MLS. Zillow is a website where you can review and compare pictures of houses along with a ton of helpful information. The type of information that Zillow can provide includes how long a home has been on the market, what type of sale it is, short sale, lease to own, etc., how much remodeling has been done, school district information, and demographics. Zillow does not have any special interests, so you can be sure that the information that you're receiving is valid and unbiased. MLS. MLS stands for Multiple Listing Service. You will usually work with this site if you employ a realtor to find properties for you. You can think of the MLS as a cooperation that pulls together information from multiple sources in order to provide you with the greatest possible number of property options. Each property in the MLS is assigned an MLS number, which provides you with a simpler way to conduct your research within its database. While the MLS has similar information to what Zillow provides, it can also offer information that is more private. Because you need a login in order to access the MLS, sometimes the information can be more confidential in quality. In addition to the benefits that the MLS and Zillow can provide during the research process, it's also imperative that you are able to identify the reason why a home is being represented at a certain value. For instance, if you find a property that you reason is a great deal, you should consider the external factors that surround the home. If the house seems adequate but appears underpriced, you should proceed with caution. It's likely that the school system is bad in this particular area, or that the crime rate is rather high. While you might not personally care about the school system or the crime rate for this particular home because you won't be living in it, the people who look at your house will. Another important aspect and rather unfortunate topic that should be addressed while you're looking at potential neighborhoods in which to buy an investment property is the number of sex offenders within a certain radius of the home. Again, while you may not care about this, especially if you're an older man, people with families and small children are most likely going to be interested in being aware of this type of information. To find out how many sex offenders live near a home in question, simply do a Google search for sex offenders in your state. Once on your state site, you'll be prompted to provide the address information of the property. Type this in, and you'll be shown how many offenders live within a certain mileage of your property. You'll also be shown what these people did, how many times they've been convicted, and the year in which they committed this egregious act. Lastly, it's advised when you're first starting your investment property journey that you only look for properties in an area in which you're familiar. If you try to purchase a property in an unfamiliar city or town, it's likely that you won't know all of the intricacies of the locale as a whole. Additionally, when you're familiar with something, you have a better idea of the culture surrounding the area and what types of people live there. You'll want to have an idea of what types of people live in the area so that you know what type of house would sell best. For example, if you buy a property in a college town, you would want to be able to offer a home with multiple rooms so that the college kids can have roommates and afford the rent for the entire house. If you know a particular destination intimately, you'll be putting yourself in a better position than if you have no idea about how the town or city operates. Tip number 3, before you purchase a rental property, don't overdo it. If you have never owned an investment property and you're researching how to get started, you want to keep the size of that property that you're purchasing in mind. It wouldn't be a bad idea to purchase a mansion because the possibility exists that the amount of work that you'll have to do will overwhelm you. If this happens, you'll be left with a property that is unfinished or will take much longer to flip than originally anticipated. If you waste too much time, you'll be losing money on your investment. The best idea when considering the size of a property is to think small. Maybe the property itself will be rather large, but the amount of work that needs to be done should be kept to a minimum. Additionally, a smaller property usually means that the mortgage payment will be cheaper as well. If something goes wrong or if you're unable to find tenants, having a smaller property can lower the risk that you're inheriting. Tip number 4, before you purchase a rental property, be wary of the short sale. A short sale occurs when the previous homeowner can no longer afford the mortgage on the property. He or she has probably been missing mortgage payments, and when this gets out of control, the bank will repossess the house and sell it. Because there is still debt against the house due to the fact that the selling price is less than what is actually owed on the property, the bank sells this type of home at a lower price than other homes in the same area. While this might make it seem like buying a short sale house is a smart decision to make, the reality is that these homes can take much longer to sell because there are a ton of technicalities the bank has to go through before completing a sale of this nature. If quick turnaround time is essential to your profit margin, purchasing a short sale property can be a risky move. If you have yet to buy any type of rental property, it should be a good idea to stay away from the short sale for now. Tackle this type of property after you've gotten a few flips under your belt, and you'll feel confident in your real estate investment abilities. Chapter 3, Financial Considerations that are crucial to a successful investment. While it might be true that you've been itching to invest in a rental property for quite some time, there's a chance that you've been hesitant to really get serious about this interest that you have because of the money that's involved. This chapter will discuss roughly how much money you need before you should seriously consider purchasing a rental property. We'll also talk about other types of financial considerations that you should be thinking about. primarily the after retail value or ARV of your property. The ARV is how professional house hunters calculate the potential profit they can make after repair costs. It's crucial that you understand how to calculate the ARV so that you too can know whether or not a potential property is a steal or a lemon. How much money is enough? We've already briefly touched on the fact that you need to put down at least 20% down payment on an investment property in order for the bank to consider loaning you their money. If we put this into concrete terms, let's say that you're looking at houses that cost between $175,000 and $200,000. This means you'll have to give the bank between $35,000 and $40,000 from the jump. This much money is a nice chunk of change, and this is only the beginning. You also have to consider your closing costs, which start around $3,000 and can get more expensive depending on the negotiations that you've made with the seller. Home insurance usually costs between $800 to $1,000, and this money is not included in the down payment that you provide for the bank. This brings us to around an easy $39,000 if we make the smaller 20% down payment of $35,000. Lastly, if you're buying a house for $175,000, it's likely it's going to need some work. Renovation costs can be as large as $10,000 if the repairs are significant in quality. And if you're looking to flip the property quickly, you want to make sure that you have the renovation funds readily available at the time of closing. It's important to note that $10,000 is a drop in the bucket compared to some renovations that people make to their homes. If you're redoing a bathroom or kitchen, you might need to budget more than $10,000 for these costs. The financial information is not meant to scare you or evoke panic, but these numbers are a reality in the world of rental property investing. While these costs might sound daunting, one advantage that you can have as a landlord is when you make the decision to own multiple properties simultaneously. If you decide to take out a loan on a second home and turn it into a rental property, you can take out money against the cost of your first rental property in order to make this happen. When you take out a loan in this fashion, the bank does not make you pay interest on the down payment that you make for the mortgage. Of course, the qualifications for this type of real estate advantage varies on a state-by-state basis. So be sure to do sufficient research into this possibility if there's something in which you're interested. You know you've got the cash. Now what? Calculating your ARV. If you're bad with numbers and often find yourself becoming quickly disinterested with anything having to do with math, make sure that you push yourself to pay attention to this chapter anyways. The after repair value, or ARV, is arguably the single most important number that you will calculate during the research period of your investment strategy. The ARV does two things. It first helps you to firmly decide how much you're going to spend for the house itself, and it gives you an idea on how much money you'll net as profit after you've flipped the property and are renting it out to someone. The ARV projects how much the home will be worth after you've made all your renovations and repairs. Most importantly, an accurate ARV calculation will help you to determine whether or not the property in question is worth the investment. While a real estate agent will be the person who can give you the most accurate version of your ARV, there are still techniques that you can use to find this number if you're relatively against the real estate agent approach to finding a property. Step 1. Research the housing market. Broadly speaking, one of the first steps that you need to take when calculating your ARV is to research some factors within the housing market in which you're looking to purchase a property. Most importantly, you should be looking at how much these houses sold for when they were still on the market. It's not enough to simply look at the final selling prices. You should be looking at homes that had renovations done to them already, so that your estimations can be as accurate as possible. Consider even talking to the buyers of these homes about how their renovations went and what they would do differently next time. Other types of services that might be useful to you during this phase is looking at some sources that we've already discussed, Zillow.com and the MLS site. A common mistake that many investors make during the researching phase is they gather information on homes that are not directly comparable to the home they're going to purchase and remodel. For example, you want to look at the selling price of a property that has the same number of rooms that your prospective property has. You also want to make sure the homes that you're researching have been recently remodeled in the same way that you're looking to remodel your particular investment property. This means that if you want to redo all the carpeted floors in a home and turn them into hardwood, you'll want to make sure that the houses that you're researching just had this expensive renovation done. Lastly, you want to make sure that you're looking at the final selling price of the house and not the list price. It's highly unlikely that any house on the market will sell for the seller's asking price unless it's located in a highly desirable area. Keep this in mind as you research properties because if you're going to sell a house later based on the houses that are cost at the asking price, there's a chance that you will miscalculate your ARV and lose money on the sale. I've included a comprehensive list of factors here that you should be looking for as you research comparable houses to the one that you want. 1. Condition. What is the current state of the house, and does it match the expectations that you have for the house that you're going to buy? How extensive are the repairs that have been done to the house, and do you have the funds that are required to implement these fixes? Also, it's extremely important to remember in this section that a short sale or a foreclosed house should not be used during the comparison process. This is yet another mistake that too many new investors tend to make. Size. It seems obvious, but the size of the homes that you're comparing to the one that you want to buy should be relatively the same size as the house that you want to buy. Look to only consider the value of a home that is between 10 to 20% of the same square footage as your prospective home. 3. Age. All of the ages of the houses that you compare to one another should be within a 5-year range of one another. Older houses sometimes require specific and unique types of repairs, and if you're not looking to purchase a new house, why would you take the time to consider repairing homes in this manner? Contrastingly, if you're looking to purchase an older home, there's no point in researching homes that are new. 4. Locale. It's a good idea to search for comparable homes within a mile radius of the home in which you're interested, but there are exceptions to this rule. For example, if you're looking to purchase property in a large city or a town that has a lot of diversity, you might want to narrow your radius a bit. Homes can sometimes vary from block to block, and you don't want to be making comparisons on different streets if you know the homes on some surrounding streets are drastically different than your prospective property. 5. Selling period. Ideally, you should be calculating your ARV based on the homes that have been sold within the last 6 months. Think about it. The housing market is constantly fluctuating. If your data is outdated, your ARV will reflect incorrect information. Step 2. Adjusting the comparisons for your home. It's safe to say that the properties with which you're comparing are not going to match your prospective home exactly. You might find homes that fall close to matching the specifications of the home that you want to buy, but you might have to tweak your ARV in order to create one that succinctly and accurately reflects your property. This is accomplished by adding or subtracting the value of certain types of features with one another. For example, let's say that your home has 2 bathrooms in it because the person who owned it before you decided to create an extra one for when guests come over. Bathrooms add great value to a property, so you found a house that has an advantage over others in its immediate area because most of them have only one. However, this fact complicates your ARV calculation a bit. Based on the general worth of a bathroom in a home, you would have to add that percentage to your overall ARV. To know how much each room in your house is worth, you would have to contact a real estate agent who could provide you with a list regarding this information based on the state in which you live. Because housing prices vary significantly from state to state, it would be misleading to provide you with an exact figure in this book. This type of adjustment needs to be made for all of the comparisons that you make between different homes and for each aspect of the house. For example, if the sizes of the house that you've researched differ too greatly with the size of the home in which you're interested, you need to account for this difference in your ARV. If the house that you're looking at is newer than the homes around it, this too needs to be justified. Make sure that you adjust each aspect of your ARV so that it best represents your home. While this step can be tedious and sometimes frustrating, it's significant because it can end up saving you time and money. If you do the proper search and end up finding that the home in question is not worth your money, because after your math you figure it out that you won't make much profit at all, then you have saved yourself hundreds of thousands of dollars. Not to mention, you've also saved yourself a ton of time. For these reasons, the ARV is considered to be one of the most important calculations for rental property investors to make. Step 3. Evaluating the subject property. After you've done the proper research necessary as described above, you have a working understanding of the value of the homes to which you're comparing the one in which you're interested. It's finally time to actually place a value on your prospective property. To do this, you have two options. You can either take the highest adjusted value that you've calculated and use that, or you can take the adjusted sales prices for each home that you researched and find the average for this number. For example, let's say that you have researched 5 properties, and they all have their own adjusted sales price. By taking the average sum of these numbers, you'll be able to generate a preliminary ARV for your specific property. Let's say the adjusted sale prices for these 5 homes are as follows. Price of comparable property number 1, $200,100. Price of comparable property 2, $195,999. Price of comparable property number 3, $250,600. Price of comparable property number 4, $210,000. Price of comparable property number 5, $199,750. Average sum of all comparable properties, $211,289.80. By taking the average sum of these numbers based on the research that you've done to find that most homes that compare to the one in which you're interested, and through the process of adding or subtracting value from them based on your adjustments, you should be able to find the actual value of your prospective property. Of course, since you want your home to be valued in a way that can reflect the highest rental options for you, you can also use the highest ARV available to you. However, this decision is one that might eventually backfire on you. If you decide to estimate the value of your home too high and then go to rent it on the market with this higher value in mind, you might end up with rental vacancies for longer than you anticipate or wish. Home vacancies are one of the scariest aspects of flipping property to rent out, because the time that the unit is vacant is equivalent to drilling a hole in your pocket and then pouring a pitcher full of $100 bills into it. It's best to keep your ARV conservative, especially because if unanticipated repair costs occur, you're more likely to be able to recover from it. Hopefully, this financial section has made it evident that knowing and calculating the ARV for your home is extremely important prior to purchasing it. One last rule that is crucial to discovering the true profit that you'll make from a purchase is to only spend up to 70% of your ARV calculation costs on refurbishing the house and flipping it. Not spending all of your ARV budget on the renovation on the house itself will give you a better idea of how much profit you're truly going to make after you purchase this house, regardless of who is going to rent it out after you flipped it. For example, if your ARV estimation comes to $200,000 on the nose, you'll want to try to make at least $60,000 profit. If you do your calculations and find out that this income is unlikely, either go back to the drawing board and find a new house to invest your money into, or go back and calculate your ARV with the figures for when you have renters in the home. Using the 70% rule will help you to stay smart in your investment strategies and will help you to keep your shirt during the purchasing process. Chapter 4. Mistakes that many inexperienced landlords make. One of the biggest mistakes that new rental property investors make is failing to calculate their ARV. Because you already know how to do that, there are still plenty of common mistakes that you should look to avoid as you learn to navigate the investment property field. This chapter will look at typical mistakes that aspiring landlords make. These types of mistakes can prove to have long-lasting consequences on the pocket of the property buyer. Once you've learned what these mistakes are and how to avoid them, you'll be one step ahead of people who take the route of learning as they go. Those people often spend more time and money than they need in order to find success. Investment property mistake number one: using your friends as contractors. Upon entering the rental property world, it can seem like anyone you tell about your new project has the same thing to say. You're likely to become a part of conversations that go something like this: I know a guy who's in the plumbing business. I'm sure he can get you a great deal on installation. Or, my wife's brother is in the window repair market. You could definitely get those busted windows replaced on the cheap. And the list goes on. While at first you might be prone to give in to these types of advances, after some time you'll begin to realize that these types of people, friends of friends, can be rather unreliable and produce spotty work. This can make things awkward for you, especially because the friend who recommended the person for the job will probably ask about how it went. Of course, you want to renovate your rental property for as cheaply as possible. This being the case, if you are referred to someone who offers adequate work at a cheap price, but they are sometimes late or unreliable, you have to weigh your pros and cons. How much is it worth to you to hire someone who is always on time? If you can live with the fact that you might have to be adaptable to a contractor's unique schedule, you might save some money in the end. At the same time, if you're unable to deal with the fact that some contractors are less professional than others, and that you're having trouble finding someone with whom you can work, this does not mean that you should try taking on the task, renovating your entire house on your own. Be rational and recognize your personal handiwork limitations. If you need to pass off the work to someone who's been working in the field for years, then do so. While you should always be wary of hiring friends or friends of friends to do the work for you, you can easily do the proper research on Kelley Blue Book or sites that are similar in nature. Another great option, if you're particularly eager to take on a certain construction project on your own, is to work until the task is beyond your ability. A contractor can always come in and fix the mess that you've made as long as you're not reckless in your execution. Investment property mistake number two: misjudging your budgetary limitations. Now that you know how an ARV works in general, it should be rather easy to see how miscalculating your budget can have detrimental consequences for your investment portfolio over time. If you go into a situation without doing research beforehand and underestimate how much renovation needs to be done, you will easily find yourself over budget. We've all seen those houses that look great on the outside, but are abandoned and half constructed on the inside because the person building the home was unable to pay additional building costs. Don't be that person. Make sure that your numbers match your decision making, and don't be afraid to go into a situation conservatively. Investment property mistake number three: forgetting the value of time. Many new rental property investors often think that certain renovations or the entire purchasing process as a whole will take less time than it really does. Especially if you have a full-time job and flipping a home is going to be your side work, you will have to discipline yourself in order to meet deadlines and start making money. The biggest consequence that it has is the loss of money. If you feel yourself getting lazy during a particular part of the renovation process, recognize this fact and remind yourself that you should consider hiring someone to do this part of the project for you. While we're on the subject of time, you will also want to make sure that you're allotting enough time for yourself to accomplish every activity that you set out to do. For example, if you take on the project of tilling your bathroom floor, map out your schedule ahead of time. It's likely this project will take at least 6 days. First, you have to map out the shape of each tile within the room so that the measurements of each tile will be consistent. This usually takes at least a couple of hours. Next, put down the thin set and place the tiles on top. You have to wait for the thin set to dry. You must put the grout in between the tiles and wait for that to dry as well. That's another day added to your time frame. Lastly, you have to go back through the room with an acidy substance to make sure that any grout that shouldn't be there is properly removed. You can apply this acid for at least 3 days after the drying of the grout. As you can see through the explanation of a seemingly simple task like tiling a floor, these projects can take longer than you might originally think. If you plan too many projects consecutively, you may end up becoming tired or overwhelmed by the workload. Plan accordingly and don't waste time. Investment property mistake number 4, becoming infatuated with your rental property. Especially if you're going to be buying a property for the first time. There's a chance that you'll fall in love with this property if you don't budget carefully or if you have big eyes for all the lofty renovations that you want to make. Investors typically fall into this trap if they have the tendency to look at all properties that are beyond their budget or do not need much in terms of repair. For example, let's say that you look at a potential rental property and really love that it has a giant backyard. Your mind's creativity goes wild thinking about the great parties that could be had back there and the possibility for making additions on the home itself in the future because of all the space that is available. If we're thinking more rationally and less emotionally, the reality is that a large backyard offers little to a landlord besides the headache of a money pit. You'll be responsible for the upkeep of the yard. There's really no reason to make additions on a rental property unless it's to add more units to the home so that you can have more tenants and make more money. Additionally, while you're thinking about the potential for this fruitless backyard, it's likely that you're underestimating potential repairs that need to be done inside of the house where these renovations matter. If you find yourself falling in love with a property, take a step back. While it's okay to feel like the rental property in which you're investing is nice and will provide a good home for others, try to look at the home objectively and through the eyes of a business person. After all, that's what you'll be after you purchase the property. Investment property mistake number 5. Don't value your tenants the way you should. Unit vacancy is one of the biggest fears that any sort of real estate investor has or should have. The looming threat of a vacant property can cause a landlord to be more lenient in determining who or she will allow to live in their rental property. This decision can sometimes end up ruining the landlord's property and profit margin at the same time. If you don't have a stringent application process for a home that took a lot of money and energy to turn into something that's livable, there's a chance that your tenants will be irresponsible with your property. There are horror stories out there about tenants kicking in walls or completely ruining the plumbing system in a home by thinking that he or she could take on the responsibility of repairman. A good tenant, someone who is responsible and who generally takes care of their home, are priceless people to have in your life as a landlord. Unless the property that you're flipping is a dump to begin with, you want to definitely check references and credit history reports. If you find a tenant who checks out and turns out to be great, your next priority should be to see if they'll sign a long-term lease. This will provide you and your property with greater security and stability. Chapter 5. How to lower renovation costs. While we talked about many of the aspects of how you can make good decisions when you purchase a property, we've yet to talk about any of the renovations that you'll be making. Just like when you purchase a property, you should do copious amounts of research prior to beginning any repair project that you're considering. Along these same lines, it's important to remember that small costs can add up quickly. It's a good idea to keep proper track of your repair expenses for 2 reasons. The first one is that you want to make sure that you can afford the renovation from the onset of the project. The second reason is that you should be keeping track of what you're spending for future projects. You have an idea of how much a specific project is going to cost you. You'll be able to plan for these types of renovations if you're ever to purchase another investment property. Now that you understand why it's important to be tracking your spending, let's take a look at specific techniques that you can use to lower your overall renovation costs. Tip number 1, don't change the size of the space. If your dream home may have always imagined a lot of open space and a few walls to demarcate the ending of one room and the beginning of another. While these types of grandiose desires are perfectly fine to have for your personal property, it's ill-advised that you try to actualize these types of thoughts through your rental property. Save these aspirations for a property that isn't being flipped. Tearing down walls and opening up the space in a home takes a lot of time to refinish. Instead of worrying about adding space to a home, consider instead building within the area in which you bought. Additionally, it can help to think horizontally instead of vertically. What if you replaced clunky large shelves with organizational units with pull out drawers? What if instead of making the kitchen larger by tearing down a wall, you build a breakfast bar so there's no need to have a table in the room? If the room is small, regardless of how it's going to be used, there should always be a way that you can refurbish the space in a way that does not require an expansion of the square footage. If you can't figure out a way to make the space work, consider purchasing a different property that will be suiting your vision. Tip number 2, light the home efficiently. If you've ever lived in an apartment, you have noticed they often do not offer much in terms of chandelier lighting. Most of the lighting in a rental property or an apartment are usually firmly attached to the ceiling. This choice isn't simply for aesthetic reasons. First, cutting a hole into the ceiling so that a chandelier can hang from it can take a lot of time and effort, especially if you're installing multiple fixtures. Secondly, overhead lighting can cost much more than recessed lighting in terms of electrical cost and wattage usage. If you're looking to save money, overhead lighting is not the way to do so. Lastly, if you're looking to cut cost on electricity, a great way to do so is to focus on optimizing the ability for natural light to penetrate the house. Of course, if your tenants are going to be living in the unit, you may not personally care about how much energy they're paying for, but energy efficiency is something that every homeowner should be mindful of for the environmental reasons. Drapes and curtains can help to give the lighting in your home variety, and if you paint the rooms in light colors, this will also make the room seem brighter than it actually may be. Another great option for lighting that is relatively cheap and can cut down on the overall lighting costs for your rental property is to install sun tubes to the roof of your home. These tubes are able to reflect natural sunlight into the home so that the areas of the home that don't receive light are able to be bright. What's more, these tubes illuminate the need to cut out chunks of the house to install new windows. Installing a new window, depending on the size, can cost thousands of dollars. Sun tubes can help to cut down on these expenses. Tip number 3, do the work yourself. As much as is possible, you should try to do all the renovations yourself. The cost that contractors quote you is often steep, especially if the job in question is a tad on the dirtier side. This doesn't mean that you have to do the entire project yourself, but there are parts of it that you can handle without the help of a contractor. You should seek to tackle the project in this manner. Even if you don't have much building experience, taking the time to paint the walls of the house yourself or picking up the supplies for the contractor to do the work are both ways that you can spend money for your budget. If you have access to a pickup truck, this can help too. If you're unable to deliver supplies to your home, the only other option that you'll have is to rent a pickup truck from Home Depot or Lowe's. Over time, this sort of cost can add up. Tip number 4, avoid putting the toilets or the sinks in new spots. Sometimes the layout of a bathroom is enough to drive anyone nuts. It can seem like you'll never be able to fit all your new fixtures in this space, especially if the space is small. Instead of trying to rearrange the fixtures in the space, such as the toilet or the sinkhole, it's highly recommended that you work with the existing spaces so that you avoid the high cost associated with this type of project. Especially if you know little to nothing about plumbing. You're going to be relying heavily on plumbers to move the toilet and sinkholes for you. Additionally, because of the fact that it's likely that you don't have much knowledge in this area, you have to trust that the plumbers are being honest with you about the cost of the work involved. If you don't have a good relationship with a plumber or a contractor who can do this type of work, you'll have no idea what you're truly getting into. For the high costs of this type of project and the fact that you'll have to put large amounts of trust in people who you don't know, you should avoid making this type of change unless you have large sums of money to throw at a project. Tip number 5, look for the cheap building alternatives. It's safe to say that everyone would love to have the finest marble for their countertops or the most expensive hardwood floors that are on the market. While you might opt for these features in your personal home, these types of materials should not be used for a rental property investment. While you're going to vet your tenants to make sure they're going to respect your property, The reality is that you don't truly know them or the people with whom they interact. There is potential for these people to disrespect your property, vandalize it, or even destroy it. For these reasons, and for the basic reasoning that are more cost effective options, you should be looking to purchase cheap building alternatives for your rental home. For example, it's relatively easy to find countertops that look like exquisite marble, but are actually made of plywood and plastic. One other good alternative with building material for making renovations on your home is called texture glass. Texture glass is made of fiberglass and is used by many builders as a cheap alternative to fixing damaged walls. Instead of replacing the drywall, spackling it, and then painting over it, texture glass cuts down the steps that are involved in this type of repair and allows you to finish your wall in a shorter amount of time. Texture glass is a great example of the fact that you should be researching building alternatives along every step of the way of the renovation process. Remember, you don't need the best materials for a rental property. You simply need materials that will get the job done. Conclusion. Thank you again for downloading this book. I hope this book was able to help you to develop useful techniques to use as you think about investing in rental property. This book hopefully served as a useful beginner's guide that you'll be able to use as a point of reference throughout the entire property purchasing process. Remember, only take on the risks that seem to make sense and don't overestimate your budget. Look for properties that you know you can afford and renovate, and take your time choosing which property you want to purchase. Lastly, do not make the mistakes that other investors that have come before you have made. Be mindful of the problems that other investors have met in the past and work to keep your operation as professional as possible. The next step is to keep doing research regarding what type of home you should be buying and where you should be buying it. When you have a solid plan that clearly outlines your budgetary limits and how you're going to go about renovating the property you choose, you will then be ready to pick a property based on the unique specifications that you have. Remember, don't fall in love with your rental property. At the end of the day, this is just a business endeavor. If you enjoyed listening to this book, please check out the other books about real estate investing that I've written. You'll need all the information you can get regarding this topic, and I've done a lot of research for you ahead of time. Finally, if you enjoyed this book, I'd like to ask you for a favor. Would you be kind enough to leave a review for this book on Amazon? It'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you, and good luck. This has been Rental Property Investing, the beginner's guide to owning rental properties and earn passive income. Written by Alex Johnson. Narrated by Pete Beretta. Copyright 2016 by K.M. Kazi. Production copyright 2017 by Alex Johnson. Rental Property Investing, 2 manuscripts in 1. The Beginner's Guide to Own Rental Properties and Tips and Tricks for Rental Property Investing. Written by Mr. Alex Johnson. Narrated by Pete Beretta. Disclaimer. Copyright 2016 by K.M. Kazi. All rights reserved. This document is geared towards providing exact and reliable information in regards to the topic and issue covered. The publication is sold with the idea that the publisher is not required to render accounting, officially permitted, or otherwise qualified services. If advice is necessary, legal or professional, a practiced individual in the profession should be ordered. From a declaration of principles which was accepted and approved equally by a committee of the American Bar Association and a committee of publishers and associations, in no way is it legal to reproduce, duplicate, or transmit any part of this document in either electronic means or in printed format. Recording of this publication is strictly prohibited, and any storage of this document is not allowed unless with written permission from the publisher. All rights reserved. The information provided herein is stated to be truthful and consistent in that any liability, in terms of inattention or otherwise, by any usage or abuse of any policies, processes, or directions contained within is the solitary and utter responsibility of the recipient reader. Under no circumstances will any legal responsibility or blame be held against the publisher for any reparation, damages, or monetary loss due to the information herein, either directly or indirectly. Respective authors own all copyrights not held by the publisher. The information herein is offered for informational purposes solely and is universal as so. Presentation of the information is without contract or any other type of guarantee assurance. The trademarks that are used are without any consent, and the publication of the trademark is without permission or backing by the trademark owner. All trademarks and brands within this book are for clarifying purposes only and are owned by the owners themselves, not affiliated with this document. Introduction. I want to thank you and congratulate you for downloading the book Rental Property Investing: Tips and Tricks to Find Success by Owning Rental Properties, Volume 2. If you've been interested in learning more about the intricacies of how to not only purchase a rental property, but how to own one that will earn you the maximum return possible, then this book is for you. Maybe you haven't yet purchased a property, but you're looking to invest in one soon. Or perhaps you've recently bought a property, but it hasn't turned out to be as successful as you originally hoped. Regardless of your situation, this book promises to delve even deeper into the subject of how to invest in rental properties. Most importantly, you need business savvy tips at your disposal in order to become experienced and well versed in rental property investment strategies. Largely speaking, that's what this book can offer you. This book contains proven steps and strategies on what it means to be a successful rental property landlord and investor. These tips go further than any beginner guide can and provides you with a working knowledge of the nuances that exist within rental property investing. With these tips and techniques at your fingertips, you'll be able to grow your rental property investing strategy in ways that you previously may not have thought possible. After reading this book, you'll be able to better navigate the investment property realm, and you'll know what works and what won't work as you spend money and make decisions based on these strategic tips and tricks. Thanks again for downloading this book. I hope you enjoy it. Chapter 1: Why Owning Multiple Rental Properties is the Way to Go. If you haven't been in the business of owning and flipping rental properties for very long, you probably still have a lot of learning to do. Sure, since reading a beginner's guide and purchasing a property, you might feel confident because you're making money each month. However, there are still huge opportunities of which you could be taking advantage. This chapter will document not only how you can go about taking the money that you've earned from your first rental property and invest it into multiple properties, but also some facts that you may have overlooked upon purchasing your first property. This includes the fact that the passive nature of owning rental properties is not always as passive as it seems. The truth about passive rental income. If you've recently purchased a rental property, or you're currently working towards buying one, and have been doing copious amounts of research in order to prepare yourself, it's safe to say that you may already be feeling and understanding how much work is involved in buying a rental property. While beginner guides may not always be truthful to this fact, one of the realities of earning money through passive income is that it often requires a lot of hard work in order to actualize your goals and profit margins. Unless you have a huge savings account and are able to pour money into renovations, home inspections, and other aspects of owning a house, that requires a significant amount of coordination. Purchasing an investment home is going to require both time and money. If you haven't yet bought a rental property, it's important to understand that passive income does not necessarily mean that there's no work involved. The research phase alone requires an active and daily commitment to personal knowledge and growth, and the work doesn't stop there. For example, after you find tenants, you will have the personal responsibility of making sure that you always have enough reserved money in case an appliance needs to be repaired or a pipe bursts. Additionally, you'll also need to make sure that the home always has its permits up to date. For example, many states require that all rental properties pay an annual apartment fee. If you're looking to purchase a rental property in the hopes that you won't have to work an active job, You still have to make sure that all the costs associated in owning a rental property are properly accounted for and taken into account. In this way, it might mean that you have to continue working a day job in order to pay for all the expenses that a rental property requires. Of course, this problem could be avoided if you decide to get into the business of owning multiple rental properties simultaneously. If you're only looking to own one rental property, the reality is you may need to keep your day job and that this passive income will only be supplemental in nature rather than the only way that you'll make money. If you look into buying multiple properties, there's a better chance that you'll be able to completely quit your active job for one that is instead completely passive. The first step to owning multiple rental properties, a quick refresher on how to purchase one rental property. While you should already know the general process of how to purchase a single rental property, we will quickly list the primary requirements that you must meet in order to qualify for a rental property investment mortgage. In order to qualify, you must 1. Give the bank at least 20% down payment for the property. 2. Prove that you have a history of paying back the money that you owe on time by accumulating a satisfactory credit history. This step will most likely require that you can present papers proving that you're a responsible person, such as through documentation stating that you've paid your own apartment leases on time in the past and that you have a steady job. 3. Agree to signing at least a 30-year mortgage with the lending company. These three steps are basically all it takes in order to purchase a rental property. It can be argued that the toughest stipulation in order to purchase one is, in fact, that you're required to put down at least 20% deposit on your investment from the start. This means that you must have money. It's that simple. So let's say that you've saved your money and finally have your 20% down payment. You've proven that you're responsible and have even been approved to purchase a rental property from your bank. After you've purchased it, have done research on how you can flip your property fast, and have taken action on how to successfully find suitable tenants, your next step should truly be to start looking into how you can purchase your next rental property, especially if you're hoping to eventually only make money through passive income streams. While owning only one property can take a significant amount of time, owning multiple rental properties can be even more time consuming. And that's not all. Before you go about owning multiple rental properties, you need to understand how to go about doing this from a financial perspective. Let's take a look at how this can be accomplished. The second step to owning multiple rental properties: know how to spend your money. The first factor to recognize when you're looking to purchase multiple rental properties is that many investors and lending companies will give you a hard time if you own more than 4 properties. After you purchase your fourth rental property, a lending company and individual investors often find that it's too risky to give you more money for any additional properties. Of course, companies such as Fannie Mae do state that they will provide rental property investors money up to 10 investments. However, even they typically need persuading after you own 4 properties. Another important factor that needs to be recognized is that if you're talking about living in each rental property that you purchase, you'll probably not be able to own more than 3 or 4 at a time. When you live in your rental property, you're taking money from your own pocket and diminishing your profit margin. You should try as best you can to not live in the rental property that you purchase, especially if the house has been renovated and is ready for rent. These considerations are important as you begin to think about how you can earn passive income for the long term, especially if you know that you want to own more than 4 rental properties. If your heart is set on earning passive income without also having a day job, then you need to know how you can get around the risk into which investors are wary to invest and how you can optimize your funds. Putting more money down on your fifth property. While you'll be able to give the bank the same 20% down payment for the first 4 properties that you purchase, your fifth property is going to cost you more cash from the onset. If you want to be successful, you should be looking to negotiate with your bank so that they agree to give you another loan that's backed by a 25 to 35% down payment. Similar to when you're purchasing your first 4 rental properties, money is the single most important factor in determining whether or not you'll be able to find a rental property that fits within your budget. Additionally, It's important to note that you should be able to get away with putting down a 25% down payment on your fifth property if it's a one-bedroom unit or a studio apartment. If the home is between 2 to 4 rooms, it's likely you'll be required to put down a 30% down payment. Of course, while you might be thinking that it will be difficult to find that extra 5 to 10%, it will arguably be easier to do so because of the fact that you have 4 other properties backing this investment. Additional financial considerations that will influence your ability to purchase multiple rental properties. Sometimes it can be easy to forget that not all investments are going to be good ones. Things can happen after you purchase a property that will take it from being a sound investment plan to something that is disastrous and ultimately a huge loss of funds. For example, if you don't hire the right person to do your home inspection for you, you could be paying for unseen repairs or abatements that you didn't think you'd have to spend your money on. While hiring the wrong home inspector can be avoided, factors that are unrelated to the property itself can also turn your investment sour rather quickly. For example, what if your mother or a loved one becomes suddenly ill? There's a chance that your ability to flip the property quickly, and this could negatively influence how quickly you can move people into the property. Here's a list of factors that will limit your ability to purchase multiple rental properties if they're low or inadequate in the eyes of an investor. Your credit score. When you own multiple rental properties, a lending institution likes to see that you have a credit score of at least 720. This consideration is separate from how your rental properties are actually doing. It requires that you're personally responsible with all your financial undertakings so that you look like a good property owner and landlord. Current payment history. You will have to show the bank that you've made all your mortgage payments on time within the last 12 months of purchasing a new property. While this should be relatively easy to accomplish because of the fact that your renters will be paying a majority, if not all of the mortgage, if you're apt to be missing payments in other areas of your life, missing a mortgage payment can really end up hurting your ability to buy multiple investment properties. Proof of tax returns. A bank will like to see that you're making consistent income from your renters. This stipulation also proves that you're actually making money on other properties and that your properties are not vacant. Vacant properties are one of the biggest fears that any real estate investor has. If your properties are vacant, you'll have a much harder time purchasing multiple properties. Bankruptcy. It should be fairly obvious, but you cannot have any bankruptcies on your credit score if you want to be considered for owning multiple rental properties. Bankruptcy will influence not only your credit score, but also your investment portfolio as a whole. If you do find yourself faced with bankruptcy, even for a single rental property, you should reconsider the endeavor as a whole and consider getting out of the business. Of course, earning passive income is great, but not at the expense of your financial security and long-term stability. Chapter 2. How to design your exit strategy and why you need one. Now that you understand why you should be looking to invest in multiple rental properties, especially if you're looking to exclusively earn passive income, the next step is to understand why you need an exit strategy. Another reason why it's a good idea to have multiple rental properties on the horizon for your portfolio is that these deals can sometimes fall through. You want to have multiple ways to generate income and multiple opportunities on which you can rely. Along those same lines, one of the key factors that many new and inexperienced rental property investors fail to plan out is a proper exit strategy for each home in which he or she invests. While ideally you want to be able to rent this property out for a long period of time, the reality is that you might not be able to do so. This chapter will focus on the reasons why you need an exit strategy and will offer tips on how to choose the right one when the time comes to make your escape from the financial burdens of the rental property in which you choose. What does forming an exit strategy entail? As was just stated, when it's safe to say that every rental property investor hopes for the best as he or she navigates that real estate investment realm, the reality is that sometimes these transactions do not go as planned. If these transactions were not risky, there would be many more rental property investors throughout the nation. Purchasing a rental property is considered to be a relatively high risk operation, which is why the need for an exit strategy is so high. At its core, the definition of an exit strategy can be best understood as a plan that the rental property investor develops so that he or she can remove him or herself from the rental property situation if and when the time comes when the investment no longer makes sense financially. While it may seem like an unnecessary precaution, developing an exit strategy should be one of your first priorities as a prospective rental property investor. Failing to develop this type of plan can cause you to lose tons of money, and the evidence of this fact can be found in the horror stories that exist about investors sticking with their investments for far too long. Allowing yourself to have multiple ways out. The most significant reason why an exit strategy is so important is that it allows you to plan multiple ways out of your investment, especially if you're new to the rental property investment market. It's not far-fetched to imagine a situation where you have misgauged the neighborhood in which you bought your property. Now you're faced with a situation where you can't rent your property out at the price that you had originally hoped. You'll need to be open to being flexible and having an exit strategy that you may not have originally anticipated. If you find that you're creating an exit strategy and it's limited in the scope, it's likely that you're being too optimistic and not realistic enough in thinking about your exit strategy. Remember, the chances that you've miscalculated some aspect of your rental property that might influence your ability to rent the property out is not unlikely. Reasons why you might need an exit strategy. Here's a quick list of reasons why your investment plan might not go as planned. Hopefully, after reading this list, you'll have a more comprehensive understanding why you'll need an exit strategy that is multifaceted in nature. 1. You don't understand the neighborhood in which you bought your rental property. One of the most basic concepts to grasp as a new rental property investor, a concept that was discussed in my beginner's guide, is the fact that you should be purchasing your rental property in a location in which you're intimately familiar. If you flip your property within a certain budget based on a preconceived knowledge that you're going to be renting out this particular property at a certain price, only to find out that the property is not going to sell at such a high price, you're going to have to revisit the goal that you have for your property. Of course, you're going to want to do heavy amounts of research into the neighborhood in which you're investing prior to the purchase, but these types of miscalculations are common. Not knowing the neighborhood intimately is the first reason why you need to have an exit strategy. 2. An exit strategy should be the precursor to your financial strategy. Your potential investors and mortgage lenders will be highly interested in understanding what your exit strategy goals are and how you're going to accomplish financial success. If you walk into a mortgage meeting with an investor or a bank and you can't fully explain the different ways in which you plan to make money from your property that go beyond the ideal situation where you're making money renting it out for years to come, the lending institution will be much less likely to give you money. 3. Start your project with the end in mind. It's far more likely that you'll be able to actualize your goals of renting out your property for a long period of time if you can articulate how you're going to get to this point on paper. While it's certainly easy to say, okay, I'm going to buy this property and then I'm going to flip it and renovate it and start renting it out. The process within these broad goals takes time and significant planning initiatives. If you plan out how you're going to reach your ideal situation, you can then branch off from your ideal locations and plan for anything that occurs that is less than perfect. Hopefully, these factors have made you see why having an exit strategy that covers multiple situations is so important. Now that we've discussed why you need an exit strategy, let's take a look at how you can go about designing your own unique exit strategy that can keep your investment safe. Before we look at the specific ways in which you can implement an exit strategy, it's important to understand two important concepts. These are the expiration date on your mortgage loan and your break-even price. Why the expiration date on your loan matters. Unless you have a ton of money to burn, there's a chance that you're going to have a loan to pay back after you purchase a rental property. It's even more likely that you'll have a loan to pay back if you're purchasing multiple rental properties. It's important to note that this loan is separate from the loan that the bank is giving you that's going towards a mortgage payment. This money is supplemental to your mortgage payment and will probably make up a large part of your down payment on the home. It's important that you're especially cognizant of the expiration date on this loan as you begin to develop your exit strategy, due to the fact that you'll need to make sure that you have the funds to pay back this money when it's due. Failure to pay back your loan in a timely manner will result in not only a turbulent financial future, a lower overall credit score and higher interest rates, and also the inability to purchase more rental properties in the future. Take note of the expiration date on your loan if you have one. You'll be glad you did. The notion of a break-even price. Your break-even price is the price that you would sell your property for so that you would not make or lose money on the investment, hence the phrase break-even. Of course, most, if not all, investors are looking to make some sort of a profit, even if it's small. But breaking even is certainly better than losing money. When you calculate your break-even price, you want to make sure that it's calculated with an inclusion of the renovations that you've made on the property. Similar to the expiration date on a loan, the break-even price can help you to determine how you will put the property back on the market if you can't rent it out at a profitable price over time. Now that you understand the importance of being aware of your loan's expiration date and the notion of a break-even price, let's take a look at the different types of exit strategies. The first type of exit strategy, renting your property to tenants. Since you've purchased this book, it's safe to say that you're most interested in learning how you can become a landlord by renting out an investment property. In this way, this type of exit strategy would be your most ideal situation, which is why we're discussing it first. Your exit strategy for a renting option should detail every aspect of your renovation costs. If you're able to find tenants based on a renting price that matches this exit strategy option, you have the option of calculating your break-even price without the renovation costs. If you choose to do this, you can calculate your renovation costs into the amount of time it will take you to start making a profit from the monthly lease amount that you'll be charging your tenants. While the bottom line will be the same for your wallet, it will allow you to allocate your funds in a different way. If you have a loan to pay off, the expiration date on your loan will still matter. But if you have tenants who are paying you every month, a consistent source of income will more likely provide you with the opportunity to pay your loan off in a timely manner. The second type of exit strategy, leases to own. If for some reason you find that no one is interested in renting the property which you purchased at the price you want, another good type of exit strategy is to put the property on the market for a lease to own option. This type of exit strategy is unique when compared to simply renting your property out because there is more of an incentive for the tenant to have a vested interest in the property. Let's say that the area in which you buy your property is mostly occupied by newlywed couples who are looking to settle down together. Most newlyweds who live in a suburban neighborhood ideally want to be owning a property instead of leasing it. If, for whatever reason, a couple or an individual does not have the money to purchase a property outright and also does not want to be leasing a home, a lease to own option would be the most preferable. Since your most ideal goal involves becoming a landlord, you may not want to lease your rental property at first. However, if you're finding that the property isn't generating the interest that you had originally hoped it would, the lease to own exit strategy can still allow you to walk away with a positive profit margin. The third type of exit strategy, lower your price. If renting out your rental property or leasing it out are not proving to be profitable or viable, your next exit strategy should involve either lowering your asking price or putting the property back up for sale altogether. It has been previously stated it's likely that your overall goals for the property in which you invest is one that will be part of your investment portfolio for years to come. However, things do not always go as planned. If you need to lower your price, it's a good idea to lower the price for which you're looking to rent out the property first. But you should only lower it to the price where you're able to cover the cost of the mortgage each month. If you have to lower the rent to the point where you personally are taking money out of the bank so that you can put it towards the mortgage on this particular rental property, there's a chance that you made a terrible investment. If you find that this is the case, then your best option is to sell the property and take the loss up front. You don't want to be shoveling money towards an investment loss month after month, especially if the tenant can't afford to pay all of the mortgage each month. Chapter 3: House Features to Avoid Like the Plague. While the first few chapters focused on how to maximize the returns from your research endeavors, this next chapter will focus on tips that you can use to choose the best property type for your investment. It's important to realize not all property types are the same. While some realtors might try to convince you that some types of repairs will be cheap and easy, the reality is that there are certain types of repairs that are simply not worth your time, especially when you're on a budget and trying to flip the property fast. These types of features are ones that many new and inexperienced rental property investors might overlook or think that the renovation process for these types of repairs or abatements are relatively easy. Let's take a look at some features that exist in a house that should be avoided at all costs. After you know what signs to look for that will indicate that you should avoid purchasing a particular home, you'll be better able to prioritize which properties to seriously consider buying and which ones can be discarded as too expensive or labor intensive. Property feature number 1: homes with pools. At first glance, it might seem like a property with a pool could be a great investment to make. Your tenants could have more fun, and prospective tenants would likely be more excited to rent out your home because they could throw summer parties in the backyard. While a pool is correlated with the ability to have more fun, the reality is this open source of water is a huge liability for a landlord. If you're looking to buy a building that isn't commercial in nature, such as an apartment complex, having a pool will be more trouble than it's worth. If you purchase a property with a pool, you're taking on any and all risks that come along with it. Think about it. If you're looking to rent out the property with the pool and you don't live near the property, the potential exists for your renters to invite people over to enjoy the pool at their leisure. If these guests of the tenants don't know how to swim, they can end up drowning or injuring themselves on your property. While no one wants these types of scenarios to occur, accidents do happen, and the potential for them to occur is higher when pools are involved. For this reason, it's almost guaranteed that as a landlord, your homeowner's insurance will increase if you purchase a property with a pool. This insurance will help to keep you financially safe if and when a tenant or a friend of a tenant causes an accident at your pool site. Another important aspect of owning a property with a pool are the zoning regulations by which you must abide. For example, in some states, it's required that a yard with a pool in it must have a fence around it. In other states, you must also let the county or borough in which the house resides know that there is a pool being installed on the property. The reason that you must tell them is so that they can charge you a zoning fee. To give you a better idea of the costs associated with owning a property with a pool, let's take a look at the chart below. Cost to install a fence between $4,000 to $6,000 depending on the square footage of the backyard. Cost to replace a pool liner between $6,000 and $15,000 depending on the size of the pool and the type of finish on it. Cost to replace a pool filter between $600 and $1,000. Cost of regular pool maintenance between $225 and $300 per week, plus the purchase of pool chemicals. As the table above shows, owning a rental property with a pool on it is no cheap gig. Unless you're willing to take on the liability of owning a rental property with a pool for your tenants, or if you can somehow figure out how to design a lease so that the tenants hold the responsibility for this type of property, you should avoid owning one at all costs, especially if you're looking to invest in a property for the first time. Pool maintenance is time consuming. A piece of sound advice is to follow in the footsteps of many property rental owners who have come before you and avoid pools altogether. Property feature number 2: asbestos. If you haven't yet heard about the danger of asbestos, it's likely that you haven't done enough preliminary research on the topic of purchasing investment properties. Asbestos has been used as a building material for many years, but it wasn't addressed by the United States government as being toxic until 1918. During the time period before asbestos became considered an extremely high-risk building material, it was touted and considered to be a great building material due to its ability to insulate a home well. It's also known to repel fire. While asbestos is technically only harmful in its powder form because of its ability to penetrate the protective barrier of the lungs and embed itself in people's organs, finding any asbestos in your potential property should raise a giant red flag for you. Asbestos can cause cancer, which no one takes lightly. Of course, if the house is older, and that's one of the reasons why it's priced more cheaply, it's likely that you'll find asbestos somewhere in the home. If you can convince the previous owners that they need to remove the asbestos at their own cost, you may be able to salvage the property. However, if you do opt for the previous owners to abate the asbestos problem, you still need to hire your own specialists after they abate in order to make sure that the area has truly been rid of all asbestos materials. In the real estate world, people can be sneaky. You should only be trusting people who you hire and avoid taking people at their word if there are ways for you to get concrete evidence of something through your own means. The average cost of asbestos abatement ranges between $2,000 and $4,000. These calculations include the following types of processes that are required when you remove asbestos: the initial removal, the lab analysis of the asbestos samples to ensure that it is in fact asbestos, and a follow-up inspection on the previously contaminated region. Asbestos in general is a headache that you want to avoid as best as you can when purchasing a rental property. If you find yourself in a situation where the property in question meets your needs financially, you should then calculate the cost of the abatement into your overall budget. This will be the best indicator as to whether or not you should go through the repair costs for this type of project. Unlike other types of abatements, such as mold, you can be sure that once the asbestos is removed, it will be gone for good. Even if you have the funds within your budget to have a contractor remove the asbestos for you, another factor to keep in mind is the fact that asbestos can exist in places in the home that may not be detectable through an initial home inspection. If this is the case, it means that even if you go through with an abatement, asbestos may still exist in your home. While it's important to note that the asbestos is only toxic when it's in powdered form, it might make you as a landlord weary if you know that you're potentially putting others in danger by renting out a property that once contained asbestos. One last note about asbestos is that you're able to treat this type of problem yourself. However, you need to make sure that you're prepared and have bought the proper supplies before doing so. These supplies include gloves, a respirator mask, a hazardous materials suit that includes a hood and closed-toed footwear. While abating the asbestos yourself will certainly cut down on your overhead costs for repairs of the investment property, it's likely that it's the wrong route to take for this type of procedure. What happens if while you're attempting to abate the asbestos in large, solid chunks, you end up turning it into powder? The result will be a home that is even more contaminated with asbestos than it was prior to your attempt. What happens if you aren't completely covered with clothing and the asbestos gets into your skin? It's not worth risking your health in order to rid a property of asbestos. Your health is worth more than a few $1,000s, but if you're hell-bent on buying the asbestos-laden property, it's worth the money to hire a professional. Property number 3, radon-infested homes. In addition to properties with pools and homes containing asbestos, another type of home of which you should be wary are ones that contain radon. Radon's most dangerous characteristics include the fact that it cannot be smelt, tasted, or seen by the naked eye. Don't let radon's invisibility fool you. While it's seemingly invisible, once it's entered a home, a person is likely to contract cancer. In fact, radon poisoning inside a home is the second leading cause of cancer in the United States. 1 in 15 properties in the United States contain the radioactive gas, and it doesn't matter if your home has just been built or if it's ancient. Radon doesn't discriminate. It can get into the home by penetrating the basement floor or can contaminate the home via the air. In some cases, radon can even get into the home via water channels such as sink vessels or showers. A home inspector will test the levels of radon when he or she does a formal home inspection for you. If the test comes back positive, you then have a decision to make. You can try to protect the house against this terrible gas, or you can kick the property to the curb and continue your investment property search. Radon abatement can cost anywhere between $1,000 and $1,200, with $1,500 being on the higher end of the scale, but still a possibility. Initially, this seems cheap when compared to the cost of abating asbestos, but when you think about it, it becomes clear that radon abatement can continue to be costly over time. After the abatement process is finished, there's no guarantee it's not going to come back with just as much force as it did before the removal process began. This means that you're investing in a risky property that might cause you heavy levels of stress in the future. What is less likely, but still is possible, is a situation where your tenants become sick because of the home in which they're occupying. If they become sick with cancer, the potential exists for he or she to sue you for the health problems they're experiencing. For these reasons, along with the guilt that you'll feel if you cause someone to become sick, you should avoid buying a home that contains high levels of radon. Chapter 4: Ways to Make Repairs on the Cheap. When it comes to making your renovation and repair endeavors as economical as possible, there are a myriad of different ways you can save. The first important thing to note is that over the course of an entire rehab, every little bit counts. A few dollars here and there will lead to huge savings by the end of your project. Don't underestimate how much those little decisions will impact the overall plan. Keeping your renovation costs as low as feasible will be an art that a real estate investor you'll never quite finish perfecting. Every project will present different opportunities to cut costs, and the same rules and strategies will not apply for every house you flip. It will be a constant learning process, but that's not to say it will be daunting. You'd be surprised how simple some solutions to common problems can be, and with some experience, you'll be able to spot ways you can save with ease. A crucial point to stress is that saving money on repairs is not synonymous with cutting corners. When you're dealing with serious structural issues or problems with houses, utilities, and infrastructure, you don't want to take a half-baked approach. As you have certainly experienced in your own life as a homeowner, there are lots of nasty surprises that can pop up due to shoddy work by the people who worked on the house before you. While a valuable mindset is to not treat an investment property as if it was a house you will move into, you still want to provide a functional and livable space to a future buyer. You can certainly save money on cheaper, more lightweight building materials, acrylic versus porcelain baths and vanities, prefabricated backsplashes versus ceramic tiles, for example. But it's imperative that a repair project is up to code and the finished space is sustainably built. While it may seem obvious, the best way to save on repairs is to do them yourself. That doesn't mean you have to be Bob Vila. Any way you can cut the labor costs down will be immensely helpful. This could mean handling the demolition yourself. Most people who have even the most basic knowledge of home improvement can tackle a demo project without problems. Another easy way is to provide the transportation of materials and waste. Why pay to have your appliances delivered or have your contractor haul things back and forth from the dump if you have a perfectly adequate pickup truck at your disposal? Even if all you can do is paint, that's noticeably less money per hour that's going to someone else. Another broad spectrum way to cut your cost is to use recycled materials whenever possible. Note that this doesn't necessarily mean used materials. There are several places where you can obtain items from a past home improvement project that were never actually installed. A Habitat for Humanity restore is a great spot to find such things. You can also go to a local auction. One can find anything from custom ordered doors, windows, and furnishings that weren't quite up to specifications, overstocked tools and hardware, to surplus sheets of drywall and hardwood, and they'll all cost far less than they would if they were brand new. Your contractor can also be a good source of reused materials. Contractors usually have bulk supplies left over from past jobs, or at least know someone who might. Recycled materials can also be found within the house itself. For example, an old dresser or cabinet can be made into a kitchen island by placing a butcher block on its top. Rather than replace an entire cabinet that's banged up, the wood panels can be replaced with glass And then the panels can be used to build a glassware rack beneath the existing cabinets. Recycling building materials for your project demands a certain level of creativity, but it's definitely worth trying whenever possible. Much of the art in reducing rehab costs lies in finding alternative solutions to small nuisance problems. For example, old doors can be quite drafty, but it's usually not necessary to replace the entire door. A cheap and attractive solution is to dress the door with a curtain that hangs on the inside. This is especially useful on French style doors with windows in the upper half. The curtain will prevent the draft and highlight the entrance simultaneously. The cost of the curtain and valance combo will barely set you back $100, far less than installing a brand new door. A simple draft stopper tube will do the trick as well, as many are made to match the style of the surrounding decor. Sometimes, though, a door simply has to go. Before you haul it to the dumpster, however, consider repurposing it elsewhere in the house. A current trend is barn-style sliding doors on the interior of a home. Old wooden doors also provide that rustic look that's so popular. The sliding kits themselves cost only about $100 and can easily be hung up a bathroom entrance, for example, by using an otherwise broken door from another entrance. Even an old farmhouse tabletop can be used as a sliding door in this fashion. The lighting of a living space is often an area of extensive yet unnecessary expense. Certainly, how a room is illuminated has a large impact on the overall feel, but many renovators feel they have to go straight to the big, ornate chandelier or the dozens of recessed light bulbs to brighten up a room. First of all, recessed lighting is very expensive, and oftentimes alternate solutions offer more light and wattage anyways. Natural light, when harnessed efficiently, can really do the trick. And here, solar tubes are an extremely effective demonstration of this concept. A solar tube is a narrow shaft of aluminum with a glass or acrylic face that's fed through the rafters of a house to draw sunlight down through the roof and into the living space. They are surprisingly effective and will only cost around $500 when installed by a professional. You can also install them yourself with user-friendly kits that are sold for roughly half that price. The fact that there is absolutely no electrical wiring involved is an added bonus. In contrast, recessed lighting can easily cost several $100s per bulb, and installing a chandelier may cost a few hundred even before factoring in the cost of the labor and the fixture itself. If you simply must have an overhead lighting fixture, consider using a repurposed outdoor lantern. These can create a nice rustic and luxe feel for a fraction of the cost of an ornate chandelier. The existing light within a room can be captured and reflected more efficiently by the room's decor as well. Brighter paints and fabrics can really transform a den or living room, and hanging reflective surfaces on the wall, such as mirrors or metal decorations, will reflect the light back into the room and make dim light fixtures seem more powerful. Another common source of expense in updating a house is ceramic tile. Bathrooms and kitchens are some of the most used spaces in any household, most likely containing lots of tile, and as such can easily be more expensive rooms to rehab. Tile backsplashes are especially popular in the kitchen. A common, easy, and cheap way to update a backsplash is to use pre-assembled sheets of patterned tile instead of installing new square or subway tile. These sheets come in many styles and materials, from mosaic stone to herringbone patterned marble. These cost less per square foot of an individual tile and are much easier to install. These sheets can also be used in shower stalls and on tiled floors. Another way to fix ceramic tile is to cover it up. There are stick-on decals that can be placed over individual tiles to give a hand-painted look, similar to Dutch squares or French toilet-style tiles. This is a very quick and easy solution to cover up cracked tiles, and most cost just a couple of dollars for a pack of 4 to 12 decals. One other interesting solution to an outdated or damaged bathroom floor is to cover it up with spa or patio style wooden planks. These come in square foot pieces that click together easily and only cost about $50 per box of 10. There's a lot you can do to keep your repair costs down. An entire book could be written on just this subject. It will take experience and a lot of research to learn all the ways you can maximize this benefit. You can set yourself up for success, however, by sticking to a few key strategies. Cut down labor costs by doing the legwork yourself whenever possible, using recycled or repurposed material whenever feasible, and look for the alternative solutions to the little fixes that can add up to be big savings. Chapter 5: Who You Need on Your Team. You can easily learn over the course of your first flipping endeavors that having the right people in your corner will dramatically improve your chances of success. Not only that, having the right team will help you build your business and pave the way for future lucrative projects. As discussed previously, it's good to do as much of the work on your own as you can, but that can be a quick path to burning yourself out if you're not careful. It is perfectly fine and highly recommended to surrender to someone else's knowledge and expertise, especially in such a technical and multifaceted profession. It behooves you to have a multifaceted and dynamic team to reflect this notion. This approach will not only benefit your business's future, but also help prevent any missteps and financial losses that could have been avoided. There are several important members to include on a high performance real estate investing team. Contractors. Arguably, the most important relationship you'll need to establish for the long term is with your general contractor. Even if you have the knowledge and experience to handle most or all of the renovation process yourself, you'll need to rely on a competent GC at some point. Since many of the costly surprises come during the renovation, this can also potentially be the most turbulent relationship among your entire house flipping team. It follows, then, that you should establish a solid working relationship with this person that is not only understanding of your objectives in the short and long term, but also easily amenable to ever-changing scenarios that constantly arise in real estate investing. It's imperative to find one that is as methodical as possible and is as honest and accurate with their estimates as they can be. It's quite common to work with multiple different general contractors, especially if you invest in multiple different locations. This is also encouraged since you want as diversified a consulting base as you can get. The general contractor is also your main connection to all of the subcontractors, who will also be working on the many different areas your project may call for. Your line of communication to these people should be as open and responsive as possible, and it should all be spearheaded by your general contractor. A helpful strategy is to have a team of contractors that have worked with each other on past rehabs. If any issues arise that were not anticipated in the initial specifications of the project, a team that is familiar with each other will be more adaptable to the demands of a rapidly shifting workflow. Situations that alter the time frame and scale of a project are quite common in this business, and they can be very costly both in time and money. If your team of contractors can move like a well-oiled machine, then these situations won't be any more of a setback than they need to be. Again, your general contractor should be treated like the general of an army. If they can't keep the troops in line and working efficiently towards a common goal, that's more work and time on your part. Your general contractor should also be someone who can accept criticism without creating too much static in the relationship that could derail the project. If they are the general, then you're the commander-in-chief. They should be held accountable for their estimates and the specifications that were established before the project started. It's important to establish a strong bond with a competent GC as early as you can, because you will likely interact with them the most closely among all the members of your team. Real estate agent. Finding a good real estate agent can significantly help secure the best deals and simplify much of the research involved with finding lucrative investment opportunities. They will also be instrumental in making sure your house gets sold at a profitable value. You should try to find a realtor that has experience dealing with flipping houses. If your intentions are clear from the start, they will be better suited to help you reach your goals. It's also important to hire one that is amenable to how you like to do business. You want to establish a relationship with a realtor that you can rely on long term to maximize the benefit to both parties for all future endeavors. It's not uncommon to work with multiple agents that specialize in different markets. As you progress in your real estate investment business, it may be to your advantage to find realtors that excel in short sales and bank foreclosures. As you become more experienced and confident in your flipping endeavors, these people will become extremely helpful in finding the best deals on purchasing distressed properties. Lenders, it should be well established by now that real estate investing is a very costly process. This is especially true when first starting out and capital is low. Securing a reliable source of money is paramount to getting your business up and running. As we discussed in the beginner's guide, this can come from a wide range of sources, including large mortgage brokers and private investors. Where their money comes from will depend largely on your financial standing before diving into the real estate game. But what's important for the purpose of our discussion here is the development of a solid relationship with your lender or lenders. Establishing trust and accountability with your lenders is crucial to your success. They are expecting you to be able to back up their investments in you, after all. This is especially true of private investors who you may know on a personal level. Knowing who the person is on the other side of the deal will really help alleviate the stress and anxiety that often comes with these types of interactions. It also helps to establish a solid working relationship with someone who you may choose to approach for future investment opportunities. These relationships can turn into long-term partnerships that create more opportunities for you as well. An accountant. Just as getting the right accountant for your personal taxes is key, hiring a good CPA for all your real estate endeavors is important to save you lots of headaches. Property tax codes can be very complicated, and it's essential to find an accountant that is familiar with the real estate investing business. Not only that, the right CPA should know how to interpret the law to keep your taxes minimal, as well as offer their knowledge on the growth and financial structure of your business. A real estate attorney. It's easy to think you don't need one, but you will be doing yourself a serious disservice without a competent attorney. Not just any attorney, but one that specializes or is at least experienced with handling investment properties. You may have noticed there's a theme here in how you should target your flipping team. Your real estate investment is a very specialized and financially and legally complex business, so you want people that are highly familiar with navigating it. Without a good real estate attorney, some deals could easily be lost, or you may end up paying much more than the cost of their services. Conclusion. Thank you again for downloading this book. I hope this book was able to help you to understand even more fully how to invest in rental properties in the most responsible and more secure ways possible. If you've read my beginner's guide, you should now be feeling more confident in the fact that you'll be able to purchase properties that need some fixing up and rent it out at a price that is sure to yield profitable results. Of course, while there is always more learning to be done, some of that learning is best established through experience. The next step is to gain even more knowledge on the subject of purchasing rental investment properties. If you're craving even more information and techniques on this particular subject, be sure to check out the other books that I have to offer. Remember, there will come a time when you'll be past the point of learning and need experience in order to make bigger strides in your investment property endeavor. Be consistent and be patient. Take the information in this book seriously and implementing these techniques into your investment strategies. It's guaranteed that you'll be seeing results in no time if you take action, remain positive, and are persistent. Finally, if you enjoyed this book, then I'd like to ask you for a favor. Would you be kind enough to leave a review for this book on Amazon? It'd be greatly appreciated. Thank you, and good luck. This has been Rental Property Investing, Tips and Tricks to Find Success by Owning Rental Properties, Volume 2. Written by Alex Johnson. Narrated by Pete Beretta. Copyright 2016 by K.M. Kazi. Production copyright 2017 by Alex Johnson. Rental Property Investing. Effective Strategies to Find Success by Owning Rental Properties, Volume 3. Written by Alex Johnson. Narrated by Pete Beretta. Disclaimer. Copyright 2016 by K.M. Kazi. All rights reserved. This document is geared towards providing exact and reliable information in regards to the topic and issue covered. The publication is sold with the idea that the publisher is not required to render accounting, officially permitted, or otherwise qualified services. If advice is necessary, legal or professional, a practiced individual in the profession should be ordered. From a declaration of principles which was accepted and approved equally by a committee of the American Bar Association and a committee of publishers and associations. In no way is it legal to reproduce, duplicate, or transmit any part of this document in either electronic means or in printed format. Recording of this publication is strictly prohibited, and any storage of this document is not allowed unless with written permission from the publisher. All rights reserved. The information provided herein is stated to be truthful and consistent in that any liability, in terms of inattention or otherwise, by any usage or abuse of any policies, processes, or directions contained within is the solitary and utter responsibility of the recipient reader. Under no circumstances will any legal responsibility or blame be held against the publisher for any reparation, damages, or monetary loss due to the information herein, either directly or indirectly. Respective authors own all copyrights not held by the publisher. The information herein is offered for informational purposes solely and is universal as so. Presentation of the information is without contract or any other type of guarantee assurance. The trademarks that are used are without any consent, and the publication of the trademark is without permission or backing by the trademark owner. All trademarks and brands within this book are for clarifying purposes only and are owned by the owners themselves, not affiliated with this document. Introduction. I want to thank you and congratulate you for downloading the book, Rental Property Investing: Effective Strategies to Find Success by Owning Rental Properties, Volume 3. This book, along with many others that I've produced, will enable you to find financial success through the purchase of rental properties. This book contains proven steps and strategies on how to purchase rental properties in smart and effective ways that will guarantee a high return on your investment with as little work as possible. If you are interested in moving past the beginner's guides that the internet can offer you, and you're ready to settle into a book that can provide you with real and substantiated information, this is where to find it. This book promises to bring you into the nitty-gritty of what rental property investing has to offer you as a landlord. This book isn't simply about tips and tricks that exist within the rental property investment market, although I've already written a great book on this topic. This book will provide you with concrete strategies that you can use in a step-by-step fashion in order to actualize your property investment goals. After listening to this book, it's safe to say that you'll be able to confidently use its strategies to get you from one stage to another throughout the real estate investment journey with little to no hassle involved. Thanks again for downloading this book. I hope you enjoy it. Chapter 1: The Snowball Effect and How to Make It Work for You. By now, it's likely that you're past the preliminary information for purchasing rental property as an investor. You're ready for more substantial information, the meat and potatoes of how you can really be a successful property owner. Even if you're not that acclaimed with the rental property investment process, fear not. This book can still be beneficial to you. In fact, if you're in a position where you don't know much about rental property investing, but you still have found yourself with this book at your fingertips, perhaps you should go backwards and work your way towards a beginner's guide after completing this book. The reality is that our entire series of books on the topic of rental property and real estate investing offer new and innovative ideas to you. With no two books alike, you'll always find yourself with refreshing sources of information and new perspective in which you can become accustomed. This chapter will focus on a theory that has largely grown to become relevant in the real estate investment strategy world: the snowball effect. After learning about what the snowball effect is, you'll be given a step-by-step overview and how the process works. It should quickly become obvious to you that the snowball effect can provide a new way for you to perceive, save, and plan for the future with the finances that you have. This strategy will help you to plan for the future by helping you to allocate your debt so that you can save more and eventually have no debt at all. Let's take a look at what the snowball effect can offer you as a rental property investor, starting with what exactly the snowball effect is. So, what is the snowball effect? The illustrative quality of the name of this effect itself is the first clue that can provide information into its meaning. At its essence, a snowball effect is when something of small importance builds upon itself over time, so that the results from this small action eventually become wildly successful and large in meaning. If you've ever built a snowman, you've witnessed the snowball effect in its most literal manifestation. While it doesn't look like much at first, over time the snowball effect grows and grows until it finally becomes either the head or the body of the snowman. This growth is what the concept of the snowball effect targets and seeks to emphasize. The snowball effect in rental property investing. Debt collection. From the perspective of the rental property investor, the snowball effect begins with the idea of debt. This is because for many investors, an investment property requires he or she to take out a loan from the onset, especially if this is the first rental property that he or she has purchased. This loan is separate from the loan that the mortgage company is going to give you against the equity on the home. After you've acquired this debt and have been given the money to invest into the rental property's down payment, you will want to pay off this money as quickly as possible. This is obvious. The longer that you hold on to this debt, the more interest that you'll have to pay over time on the debt. Most people use this money that they're receiving from their leased rental property towards the debt that they may need to pay off on their loan payment. This is a good strategy because it makes it possible for you as the investor and landlord of the property to keep track of exactly how much you're spending and earning against the debt that you've accumulated over time. While debt can sometimes be stressful to take on, it's also extremely liberating once it's been paid off. It can feel like a huge weight has been lifted off your shoulders. As has been previously discussed in other rental property investment books that I've written, one of the most significant ways that you can earn staggering amounts of passive income while renting out investment properties is by purchasing many rental properties instead of one. Of course, you're probably thinking that this will require you to pile heaping amounts of debt onto yourself, but this doesn't have to be the case. Let's consider for a moment a situation where you pay off the debt from your first rental property in 5 years. You're debt free, and you can finally focus more of your attention on saving money instead of constantly spending it. While it took 5 years for you to pay off your debt, it will take you even longer for you to have enough money to invest in a second rental property. Instead of waiting at least 5 years before you have the funds to invest in your next home, you have the option of taking out another loan. If you take out the loan, you'll be able to invest in another property more quickly than if you waited until you could afford it without the need to take out a loan. Initially, you might be thinking that this would be a bad idea. More debt? However, when you think about this from the perspective of the snowball effect, it makes sense to take on the debt that a new loan would create. So let's say that you're earning $500 from the monthly rent on your first rental property. Once you take out your loan from the second property, you still have the debt, but you'll also be earning $1,000 per month from both rental properties instead of the $500. This means that you'll be paying off your debt faster than the 5-year rate in which you previously paid it off the first time you took out a loan, as long as you pay off your debt through a consistent frequency of payments as you did when you were paying off your first loan. This is the snowball effect at work. The ultimate goal for most rental property investors who are using the snowball effect is to get to a point where they don't need to pay off a loan because they're receiving enough money from their multiple tenants each month that they can get to a point where they don't have to take out a loan in order to purchase new rental property. Instead of taking out a loan, you'll be able to save money within a shorter period of time and then purchase a property that will lead to higher dividends for you. Of course, the snowball effect takes many years before it becomes profitable, but if you can take out debt and manage it effectively, you'll be able to benefit from this phenomenon, especially later in life. The snowball effect is a great technique for people of the retirement age in particular. Chapter 2: Choosing Your Neighborhood Through a Formula. The snowball effect is a great technique to use as a long term investment strategy. However, there is nothing stopping you from using multiple strategies throughout the rental property investment process. This chapter will focus on a strategy you can use as you consider which properties you're going to be purchasing your rental property. What's important to keep in mind as we move through this section is that your criteria for which type of neighborhood you wish to purchase will be different depending on a variety of factors. For example, maybe you enjoy typically purchasing property in one type of neighborhood, but you're looking to diversify your portfolio or try something new. If you find that you have a certain type of neighborhood in which you've been successful in the past, don't count out other types of properties that could be available to you. Even if the suggestions in this book don't currently entice you, there is a chance that they will one day. Be open to the possibilities that are available through the tactics discussed in this chapter, and come back to this advice if you don't find yourself currently able to use it. The first step: knowing your market. The previous books that I've written have certainly made the claim that when you're first starting out in the real estate market, you really should consider only buying in a market in which you're familiar. Knowing your market will help you to make better decisions when you're purchasing your property. You know which schools are good and which are bad. You'll know the crime rate in certain areas of your market, and you'll be able to discern the demographic that you want to target based on the location where you're making your purchase. The first step to the formula that involves choosing the best neighborhood to fit your needs as an investor is making sure that you know your market. There might be a situation where you want to buy in a certain area in which you're unfamiliar. Maybe you know that this particular neighborhood is quickly gentrifying, and you're eager to get in on the action that cheap flipping can offer. Or maybe there's a home in a nearby college town where you don't exactly know the details of the demographics, but you'd like to find out. Whatever the case may be, you need to make sure that you are intimately familiar with the neighborhood in which you're interested in purchasing. Here are some tips on how to do exactly that, especially if you have no idea about the ins and outs of the neighborhood in question. Tip 1: talk to people. Don't be afraid to talk to people who live in the immediate vicinity of the home in which you're interested. Talk to shop owners. Converse with people walking their dogs and strike up conversations with anyone who will listen. You'll be able to find out not only additional information about the neighborhood, but about the general tone and feeling of the locale. Are people friendly, or do they shrug you off and ignore your inquiries? These are the types of neighborhoods that might be best to stay away from. Of course, you're not going to be living in this neighborhood, but purchasing a property in a neighborhood where people are welcoming is a small detail that might make the difference between your tenants choosing to live there for 10 years rather than 1 or 2. Tip number 2: spend your weekends there. This next tip requires some spending money, unless you already have friends living in the neighborhood in question and you can crash on their couch. You should be spending your weekends in your prospective neighborhood so that you can make sure that this is the type of place that either an adequate nightlife or a quiet and peaceful atmosphere, whichever will better complement your property. If you find that the neighborhood is not lively enough, or contrastingly, is too rambunctious, you know that this property is not for you and that you should be looking elsewhere. This tip, if you follow it, will not merely take a weekend. Make sure that you take at least a month or 2 to really become well acquainted with the weekend activity in the neighborhood. Failing to do so can result in less tenant interest and a longer vacancy period. Tip 3: drive around. Another great tip that can be used if you don't have the money to spend multiple weekends in the neighborhood in which you're interested is to simply drive around. You should be looking to drive around during both the night and the daytime so that you can get a good overall feel for the types of people who are out and also the accommodations that exist in this particular area. Are there a lot of coffee shops? Is there a library? How active is the neighborhood's main street? These are the questions that you should be asking as you drive through the town. If the town seems boring, outdated, or full of old geezers, you may want to reconsider this property. The second step, dividing each type of neighborhood into classes. After you become well acquainted with the neighborhood, the next step is to break down each type of neighborhood into multiple categories. While you may have only seen properties that exist within the same category, it's important to realize that there can be multiple types of neighborhoods within one town or locale. Some areas are nicer than others. It's that simple. There should be 3 different classes for each type of neighborhood. Let's take a look at what these 3 classes are comprised of. Class A, the fancy class. The fancy class is predominantly owned by homeowners. Very few tenants occupy these homes, and the ones who do are sometimes looked down upon by the other homeowners in the neighborhoods. These lawns are manicured, they look sharp, and they're full of parents who recently had children. From an investment standpoint, you may want to stay away from these properties for the simple reason that they will require a lot of upkeep. While it's not likely, I have heard of situations where the neighbors of an investment property will contact the landlord if the grass isn't upkept, if the trash cans stay on the side of the road after trash day for too long, or if the leaves aren't raked when fall rolls in. For these reasons, when you recognize homes that are in the A class, you want to stay away from them unless you know that the tenants who are going to be renting the property from you are responsible homeowners who will be proud of the home in which they're living. Class B, the ideal class. Class B is the class in which you should be looking to invest. These types of properties are not perfect by any means, and the neighborhood in which they're located are extremely similar. This neighborhood does not mostly consist of properties that are owned by new homeowners or young newlyweds who are seeking perfection in their life. Instead, the homes in these neighborhoods are a mix between rental properties and the ones owned by homeowners outright. This type of neighborhood can best be described as a working class neighborhood. One good way to figure out whether or not a particular neighborhood is in the B class is by recognizing when there are a lot of utility vehicles in the driveways. This usually can signify that it's more blue collar than white. The primary reason why this type of neighborhood is typically more advantageous than an A class is because there's less pressure on you as the landlord to make sure that everything on the property is neat and organized. When you purchase a property in the B class, you typically have more freedom as a landlord. Class C, the crapshoot. The Class C neighborhoods consist of homes that can either be highly lucrative or a complete nightmare to operate. The crime rates are high in these neighborhoods, and the tenant turnover rate is often equally as high. There are successful landlords who invest in these properties. However, they are usually employing a property management team that's skilled and aggressive in their tactics in order to ensure that they aren't swindled or taken advantage of. If you're looking to stick to only a few rental properties, it's best to stay away from a C-class neighborhood. However, these homes have the potential to yield high returns, even though they can be dangerous. As you can see from this chapter, there are ways that you can classify the property that you're purchasing based on the neighborhood in which it resides. Nobody wants to live in a dangerous part of town if they're not used to loud noises or don't own a weapon. And similarly, nobody wants to live in a fancy or pretentious neighborhood if they're on the more casual or blue-collar type. It's important to keep in mind that renters aren't usually going to be people who can't afford to purchase a home on their own. And so buying a rental property in a ritzy area might cause you to actually lose money if you're unable to charge high prices on the rental home. Chapter 3, a step-by-step strategy for buying and selling rental properties. While we have discussed ways in which you can make the best decisions possible as you navigate how to purchase a rental property, we have yet to determine a specific step-by-step strategy for doing so. This chapter will focus on how to choose a property based on an important list of criteria. After reading this chapter, you'll be able to quickly determine whether or not a property is worth your time based on simple formulas and math equations. It might sound complicated at first, but don't panic. Even if you're not good at math, these equations will be explained in detail. Let's take a look at these financial considerations that you should be making as you think about the purchase price of a property. Consideration number one, is the property priced below the market value by 10 to 20%? One of the first questions that you should be figuring out upon finding a property that you like is whether or not it's priced between 10 to 20% below market value. This will not only help your wallet, but will also give you security. If for some reason you have to sell your property quickly in the future due to an emergency or a different type of circumstance, you'll be able to do so knowing that you can lower your asking price if need be. Lowering your asking price will likely result in a quicker sale. Additionally, if you purchase the property below market value and you don't have to sell quickly, you can sleep easy knowing that you made a return on your investment. When you buy a property at below market value, you're putting yourself in a win-win situation. Consideration number two, will the property yield at least a 15% return on the investment? If you've never heard of the term return on investment, it can be best defined as the amount of return in money that you get back in comparison to the money that you originally spend at the start of the investment. You can think of this as being equal to how efficiently you managed your money. Are you seeing a profit from your efforts? If not, you'll have a low return or ROI. For most investors, the ROI equation is extremely popular because it's versatile and can be used in a variety of scenarios. Another reason why it's popular is because it can be used prior to purchasing the property. A good tip when deciding which property to buy is to calculate the ROI for each property in which you're interested based on the price that you've negotiated with the seller. This will help you to narrow down your criteria quickly and efficiently. Here is the return on investment equation. The ROI equals the gain from the investment minus the cost from investment, and divide that by the cost of investment. As you can see from this equation, a basic knowledge of algebra is enough to provide you with a quick and comprehensive answer as to whether or not a particular property is worth your time and, more importantly, your money. While the ORI is a great tool, its limitations should also be discussed. One of the major limitations of the ROI equation is that it does not account for time. If you calculate a great ROI but then sit on your investment for a year before you start renting out the property, your ROI percentage is going to be skewed. If you are unsure about how quickly you will be able to flip a property, there's a chance that you'll miscalculate your profitability. Obviously, miscalculation could lead to huge losses over time. Because the ROI will yield a number as a percentage, it will be easy to tell you whether or not the property will generate a 15% ROI annually. When you calculate this, make sure that you're taking into consideration all of the cash that you've put into the sale, not the entire debt that you've accrued through the mortgage. For example, let's say you purchased a property at the price of $175,000. A 20% down payment on this amount would lead to $35,000, meaning that in order for you to make a comfortable profit, you would need to make at least $5,250 per year after your expenses. This means that if you have a lot of renovating to do and can't find tenants as quickly as you had hoped, the property in question might not lead to as much profit as you had originally anticipated. Additionally, it's important to note that 15% is a lowball estimate in the rental property investment industry. Most investors look to make at least 20% or more per rental investment property. Consideration number three, will you be able to charge rent that's at least 1% of the purchase price? Being able to charge at least 1% of your purchase price goes hand in hand with calculating an ROI percentage that's at least 15% of the cash money down for the property. While this may seem like it would be relatively easy to accomplish, it can also be harder than it seems. What's important here is considering the number of rooms that you're purchasing, and of course how high the rent is in the immediate area where the property is located. It's well known in a rental property community that multiple room houses sell for more money than do single unit homes or studio apartments. Of course, the lone person who rents out a single unit or a studio is going to pay more per square unit than are the people who choose to live together. But because the money is being distributed more widely, you're able to generally charge more for a bigger home that has multiple rooms. If we take the example from the previous section, this concept becomes clearer. If you were to purchase a home at $175,000, this rule states that you should be renting out the home for at least $1,750 per month. $1,750 can be steep depending on where you buy the property. Be sure to look at the rent in the surrounding area before you purchase the home and stick to the 1% rule when you can. Hopefully, you can use the rules represented in this chapter and the formulas along with them to be able to recognize whether or not a property is worth your money. If the odds are stacking up against the property, you'll know because you have concrete evidence on which to go. Take your time with each property, calculate the ROI, the 1% rule, and make sure the neighborhood falls into the B class. Through this step-by-step elimination process, you'll be well on your way to finding a property that fits these characteristics sooner or longer than you think. Chapter 4, Tax Deductions that are possible for you and your rental property. As a landlord and rental property owner, you may or may not know the tax breaks that are available to you. Everyone is different. Some landlords buy a property fully recognizing the tax breaks, and they can receive them from the government, while other landlords have no idea and miss their opportunities to save money. This chapter will help you be the former and not the latter. Tax season can be a stressful time for homeowners and landlords alike. If you or your CPA screw up your taxes, some of these details can get pretty intricate, so it's important that we discuss them in their entirety. Let's take a look at some of the tax deductions that are available to you as a landlord now. Situation 1. Making a tax deductible on your interest payments. You may be excited to learn that you can declare a break on your taxes on your interest payments, but don't get too excited just yet. You can't deduct from interest that you're paying on your principal mortgage payment. This is the money that you borrowed from the bank so that you could buy the house. However, there are still options that you have. Here is a comprehensive list of situations where you can legally declare a tax break on the interest that exists on your rental property. It's important to note here that you can only get a deductible for a part of a loan that you legally owe on. If you took out a loan with someone else, you cannot get a tax break on their portion of the money. If you do try to do this and get caught, you could go to jail. Situation 2, credit card payments. When I say credit card payments, I don't mean any and all credit card payments that you make when you own a rental property. Wouldn't that be great? You are able to declare a tax break on a credit card interest payment when it's being used during the act of rental property repair costs or other associated items. If you often use a credit card, but lately have been running up a high interest rate on it, this break could be beneficial to you. Situation 3, personal loans. If you have a friend who has loaned you money for the rental property at a lower interest rate, or maybe a family member who is giving you a great deal on interest, you are still able to deduct this interest from your taxes if your friends or family are even charging you interest. This can be a great loophole if the interest that you're paying is low. Situation number 4, improving your property. The next type of deductible that you're able to use is when you take out a loan in order to improve the aesthetics of your rental property. If your home is outdated and you're looking to refurbish it, this might be the route to take. Rather than simply paying for the renovation costs as you go, you can simply pay for a loan from a bank and worry about paying off these renovations later on. Of course, you'll be technically paying for these renovations at a higher rate than buying them outright because of the fact that you have to pay interest on your loan, but you'll be able to deduct these costs at a later time. One recent change in the status of whether or not this is a good option for a landlord is the trust that you feel in a financial institution. Are they going to give you a fair interest rate for this money? Or are they going to gouge you so that they can make the most money possible? This is something you have to personally weigh for yourself and is a consideration that didn't necessarily have to be made in the past because there was more trust in the banking sector as a whole. Claiming your home as an office space. Even if you don't consider your rental property a legitimate business, it could pay to distinguish a specific area of your home as an office space for tax break purposes. In order to receive a tax break, you have to have a clear and concise record of how you're being paid each month. If you don't have a real office space, where else are you going to accumulate this documentation besides your home? The government doesn't exactly make it easy for you to claim this space as a business site. You cannot simply say that the entire house is your office. Instead, you have to determine that square footage of the space itself in order to benefit from this deduction. Either divide the office's square footage into the square footage of the entire house, or divide the space by how many rooms that the office comprises compared to the number of rooms in the entire home. Renovations versus repairs. A repair can be best defined as anything that is changed on the property that keeps the quality of the home the same. A renovation, on the other hand, is a repair that improves the quality of the home. These differences are important when seeking to understand how repairs and renovations work with your taxes. For example, repairing a home might include a new paint job or replacing an old decaying window. Both the walls that are being painted and the windows that are being replaced are always there. So this is considered to be a repair rather than a renovation. Keep the receipts for these types of jobs because they are tax deductible. On the other hand, if you kick out a wall where the laundry room used to be and install plumbing so that you can have a fabulous new powder room, you are renovating the property instead of merely repairing it. This is renovation cost, which cannot be deducted on your taxes. You must bear the brunt of this cost up front and hopefully make your money back on a renovation when you go to sell the property at a higher price than which you would have originally sold it. Why your mileage matters. Lastly, if you're running to the Home Depot on a bi-weekly basis to pick up lumber or other building supplies for your home, you are using gas that is tax deductible. However, this only works if you're claiming that your home is also partially a business property too. To do this, you have two options. You can either keep track of the total percentage of your miles that you use for rental property purposes and compare this to your overall mileage for the year, or you can go to the IRS website and find the predetermined pre-mile rates that they publish every so often. These rates tend to change once or twice a year, so if you're going to use this method, be sure that you're using the most current version of the document. Chapter 5, Raising Your Rent Without Much Justification. Just like the last chapter, this chapter will look at how you can make more money from your rental property through unique and distinctive strategies. What's different from the last chapter is that you probably feel more justified by the fact that you can take money back from the government. When it comes to taking more money from your tenants, it can be a tricky and sometimes awkward situation, especially if you're living in the same duplex property as the tenant and you're technically sharing the space. You might have a hard time feeling good about the fact that you're going to be raising their rent. This chapter will look at the laws that exist around raising a tenant's rent, and we'll also discuss how you can raise the rent while still feeling good about your morals and greediness. Advance notice. If you're interested in raising your tenant's rent, you cannot simply require it and, on the same day, require that they pay you this money. There are rules protecting the tenant from landlord gouging techniques that are prevalent all over the country. Regardless whether they have a month-to-month lease with you or one that spans 2 years, you must give them at least 30 days written notice of the fact that you plan on increasing their rent. This notice must have a date on it and can either be hand-delivered to them or mailed. Traditionally, most of these types of notices will state that the rent increase will take place on the same day that the rent is due on the next pay period. While you can certainly increase the rent as much or as little as you like, keep in mind that you must give your tenants advanced written notice in order to the increase to be considered legally binding. Additionally, it's pretty obvious that if you increase your rent by a large amount, there's a chance that you'll be left with a vacancy. How to raise the rent technique number 1. Don't provide justification. It might seem like requiring your tenants to pay more money each month is as stressful as asking your boss for a raise. However, this doesn't have to be the case. It's important to remember when you want to raise the rent that you're not your tenant's friend. You're running a business, and even if you don't feel that it's professional in quality, it's likely that your tenants will feel as if you're a professional. As a professional, you don't need to provide justification for a rent increase. That's a luxury that you have as an owner of the property. Of course, if you're raising the rent for the first time, you might feel as if your tenant or tenants are going to feel angry or offended that you're increasing their rent. While not providing justification for your rent increase may seem curt, it's also the best way to avoid a negotiation period where the tenant thinks that he or she can convince you to keep the rent at its current rate. Stick to your guns and be firm in your decision to raise the rent. How to raise the rent? Technique number 2. Understand your market. We've already discussed how you need to make sure that you know the market in which you're going to purchase your rental property. As you look to increase rent on your property, the stakes are no different. If you raise your rent without looking at the rent rates around you, there's a chance that you'll be setting yourself up for a vacancy. If there are homes in your immediate area that are comparable amenities for cheaper prices, what's stopping your current tenants from leaving your property? Nothing. How to raise the rent? Technique number 3. Understand the laws of the land. You need to make sure that you're following the laws of the state in which the property that you have resides. You don't want to be sued by a tenant for unlawful treatment or negligence. In most states, if a tenant files a complaint against you, this means that you can't raise your rent for a specified period of time after the complaint occurs. This rule helps to ensure that landlords aren't raising rent on their tenants if the tenant decides to file a complaint with the county or government. This rule typically lasts for between 60 to 180 days after the tenant takes action against you. Additionally, it shouldn't have to be stated, but you can't raise your rent due to a tenant's sexual orientation, race, or religious orientation. How to raise the rent? Technique 4. Increase the rent by a bit at the end of each rent period. Instead of surprising your tenants with a large and unsustainable rent increase at the end of a pay cycle, it's likely they will be less objective to a small rent increase at the end of each pay cycle. Let's say, for example, that you have great tenants who have agreed to sign a 2-year lease. At the end of every 2-year lease period, you decide that you will raise the rent at the rate of less than 10% of their current rent payment. 2 years is a significant amount of time to be renting an apartment. It's more likely that the tenants will understand that the market circumstances may have changed during this time period, and they'll be more willing to pay a small increase. Nobody likes to feel like they're being gouged, and if you decide to increase the rent substantially once, there's a chance that your tenants will feel exactly that. You don't want to feel slimy as a landlord, which is why you should consider increasing the rent in increments over a long period of time. It'd be most advantageous to you if you could implement these increases into your long-term budget so that you can plan better for the future. Chapter 6. Why you should be thinking about multifamily homes. This chapter will turn away from the financial considerations that have occupied a majority of this book thus far. While the neighborhood in which you choose to invest is a huge decision that you may have to make, another consideration you should be making is whether to invest in a single or multifamily property. This chapter and author advocates for the latter. Multifamily homes can offer many advantages that simply do not exist for the landlord of a single-family home. Once you understand the importance of multifamily homes as a landlord, you'll be much more likely to consider investing in one. Of course, the notion of multifamily properties may seem strange at first, especially if you know little to nothing about them. But these properties can offer you greater returns on your investments among other great advantages. Reason number 1 to invest in a multifamily home: easier management. One of the first reasons why, as a rental property investor, you should be interested in investing in a multifamily property is that it will require less effort from the landlord in terms of management. Think about it. If you own single-family properties, then you have the responsibility of traveling to these properties on a regular basis to ensure that everything is flowing smoothly. If you own a multifamily property, it means you only have to travel to one location in order to manage properly. This is a great advantage to anyone who owns multi-rental properties because it saves you time, which in turn ends up saving you money. Reason number 2 to invest in a multifamily home: easier appreciation. A second reason why you should consider purchasing a multifamily property as an investment is because it's easier to renovate a home and have it appreciate in value more quickly when the home is in a multifamily structure. Instead of renovating only one property, when you invest in a multifamily property, you're able to renovate and appreciate the value of two homes instead of one. Again, this saves you both time and money. For example, if neither of the units in a duplex consist of a laundry room, you can build a laundry room to which both units can gain access. You'll be saving money on resources and maximizing efficient use of space. Instead of buying two washers and two dryers, you only have to buy one each. These types of considerations can be applied to many areas of the home if you're creative. Reason number 3 to invest in a multifamily home: greater cash flow. Of course, owning two living units instead of one automatically leads to greater immediate cash flows for your investment. If you own two units in the same home and each have three bedrooms in them, this means that you'll be able to make double the amount of a certain rent price. It also means that if you have done your research and you know that you want to set your rent price at $1,400 per month, you'll actually be able to make $2,800 per month if you fill the vacancies that exist in both units. This type of increased cash flow will definitely do wonders for your return on investment, and it's likely that you'll also be able to pay off this mortgage more quickly. If you purchase multifamily properties, think about the cash flow that you can create. Additionally, a subtler yet still great opportunity for you to make some small amount of extra cash flow is through appreciation techniques that you can make on the property. For example, if we go back to the example of creating one laundry room from multiple units that we discussed in the previous section, it becomes pretty clear on how you can make greater cash flow through creative means. Why should you offer your laundry services for free? If you simply attach a coin machine to each laundry unit, you can be making small increments of money without even knowing it. I know what you may be thinking. So, what if we can make $1 or two each week? That's not much cash. Well, you're right, $1 or two isn't too much money in itself, but think about how much you can make over time through these means. $2 per laundry use can easily turn into $100 in a short amount of time, depending on how often your tenants clean their clothes. Who wouldn't love to earn an extra $100 every couple of months? While you can get creative in other ways, such as implementing a cost to use a parking space, or if your property is located in a congested city, or implement a cost that will serve as a pet deposit that will ensure that your property is safe from the damage that pets can do, it's important that your tenants don't feel like you're gouging them. You can get creative, but you should also look to be fair where you can. Along these same lines, if you're using technology such as coin machines, you might want to also consider purchasing cameras that can be installed in various locations on your property. Nobody likes to feel they're being spied on, but at the same time, you also want your property to be safe from any fraudulent activity. If you're going to have open sources of money on the property, there should be some sort of security device in place that will cut down on crime if and when any type of misdemeanor was to occur. Reason number 4 to invest in a multifamily property: there are great tax breaks for people who own multifamily homes. I actually own a multifamily investment property, and I do not gouge any tenants. In fact, their rent is at a fair price, and they are extremely happy because of it. They have agreed to sign not just a 1 year, but a 2 year lease for the living space, which means that I'm able to sleep easy at night knowing that I will have a steady source of income for at least a 2 year period. The reality of this type of situation is that if I had decided to hike the rent prices way up when I originally bought the property, there is a chance that this decision would have resulted in a property vacancy, or that these people would have had trouble affording housing if they were not able to stay in this current location. When you own a multifamily property, you have the added satisfaction of knowing that you're helping people find affordable housing. What's also nice about this fact is that the government also appreciates what you're doing. In order to benefit from all the tax breaks that are involved in earning a rental property, you should strongly consider hiring a certified public accountant, a CPA, that specializes in investment property strategies. He or she will help you to get the most from your tax declarations. Wouldn't it be great if you got enough money from your taxes that if it paid for an entire year of your homeowner's insurance? These are the types of possibilities that exist when you're exact in your estimates and are detailed in your financial planning goals. Reason 5 to invest in a multifamily home: it becomes attractive to other investors over time. One final reason why you should definitely consider owning a multifamily property instead of a single family home is that the renovations that you make are almost guaranteed to be attractive to other investors. Due to the fact that you'll be renovating the multifamily units prior to anyone moving in, you'll be greatly improving the wealth of the home quickly. If you keep the grounds neat and manicured and make sure that the property is kept looking nice, it's likely that you'll be able to easily sell the property when you're ready. This means that if for some reason you have to sell the property quickly due to an emergency or a fast job change, you have security knowing that you'll probably get more than what you paid for when you first invested in the property, especially because a multifamily unit guarantees a larger cash flow than a single family property. You'll be able to attract a multitude of investors who will be willing to negotiate with you to find a fair price for the property. Chapter 7: How to Make Rental Property Investing Truly Passive. By this point, you've taken in a ton of information on how you can invest in a rental property in a way that will likely lead to great profits with hopefully little to no doubt over a long period of time. All of the tactics that have been presented in this book, while they should be useful, have one giant factor in common. They all require some sort of work. As a rental property investor, you're probably eager to learn about how you can make your investment truly passive in nature. That's what this chapter will encompass. Of course, one unfortunate truth about developing a truly passive rental property investing strategy is that it's going to cost money. All of the tactics presented in this chapter will be costly to your budget. However, this shouldn't be that surprising. One of the key facets to any passive income endeavor is that it takes extremely hard work in the beginning in order for passive income success over time. This being the case, it's likely that you won't be able to implement these strategies until you've been investing in properties for quite some time and have many properties under your belt. However, it's important to keep these strategies in mind as you become more versed in rental property investment and treat these tactics as goals to reach as you and your entrepreneurial business grows. Passive income strategy number 1: finding a property manager. The first strategy that will definitely allow you to be more hands-off in your real estate investment goals is to find a property manager. Of course, unless you know someone who owes you some money or owes you a favor, you're going to have to pay this person to work for you. If you end up hiring a manager, make sure that it's someone who has experience in the property management field. Of course, you certainly have the option of hiring someone at a cheaper rate who is new to the property management field. But there's a possibility that this will go poorly for you, especially if you plan on interacting with the business in a hands-off fashion. Ideally, you want a property manager who cares about your property, as well as someone who is personable and professional. Similar to when you were working as a property manager, you should be wary of any property manager who seems to be a bit too close to the tenants. You want this operation running as a business, not as a free-for-all. If you can find a property manager who has experience working with properties in the past, and you can contact their references, this is a great place to start. Another option that you have, if you purchase a multifamily property, is to hire one of your multifamily tenants to act as the property manager. If you don't have a crazy amount of funds to invest in property management, this might be the best way to go. Instead of giving your tenants money in exchange for their services, it would be a better idea to simply reduce their rent. Of course, you don't have to disclose to the other tenants on the grounds that you're planning on reducing this tenant's rent in exchange for their services. Additionally, this will provide you with an added sense of security due to the fact that this person is likely going to care about the property more than the average property manager because he or she is living directly on the grounds. This is a great way to save some money on the typical property management salary and can also be a reason why your tenants end up renting from your property longer than they originally intended. Typically, you can expect to pay between 8 to 12% of the total monthly rent that a tenant pays each month to your property manager. If the average of these two numbers is 10%, this means that for a monthly rent of $1,400 for a 3-bedroom unit, you will be paying your property manager around $140. This can be a steep price to pay depending on where you live. From these numbers, it's easy to see how you need to have a substantial amount of income prior to even beginning to think about hiring a property manager. Passive income strategy number 2, hire a groundskeeper. One of the biggest challenges that a single landlord can face is the grounds of a property, especially if you end up buying a single family home. It can be a little overwhelming to keep up with the demands that nature and the elements can throw at you. In the summer, the lawn needs to be cut pretty much every week. In the fall, the leaves start to fall and they need to be raked. In the winter, you need to make sure that the sidewalks in front of your property are fully plowed to ensure that none of your tenants injure themselves on your property. While it may seem like a simple solution to hire a groundskeeper, don't get too excited yet. In 2016, the average cost to hire a groundskeeper was a whopping $3,220. Contrastingly, the cost for a lawn service ranges between $30 to $80 per visit, depending on the company that you use and the general price for these types of services in the area in which your property is located. Additionally, these types of services typically will charge a flat fee for the initial lawn services, such as cutting and manicuring the lawn. After the initial fee, they charge extra for services such as leaf blowing, edging, and snow blowing. For the property that I own, I am lucky enough to have a tenant who is also in the landscaping profession. In exchange for paying a lower rent each month, I'm able to have the lawn of my investment property cut virtually for free. Of course, I'm losing money based on the fact that I could be making more of a positive cash flow if I was charging the higher rent, but not having to cut my own lawn is a huge advantage for which I'm grateful. My current tenants are fabulous in the sense that they feel that my investment property is their home. In addition to cutting the lawn, this tenant, who is a landscaper, also blows the leaves and plows the walkways free of charge. It's safe to say that I've hit the jackpot in terms of having a tenant who is flexible and will work with me to keep the costs low for the both of us. While not all of the tenants that you'll be able to find will be landscapers, this is just one example of how you can get creative in how you can have your tenants pay for you in ways other than money, especially when you're first starting out. This type of strategy is good because it provides you with options when paying for something outright isn't one of them.